So good morning, everybody. We start off this morning with the Planning and Development Committee, so I will go to Director Knodel to chair that one. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Director Pendergraft, and welcome to the Thursday, October 5th, 2023 meeting of the Planning and Development Committee. Looking for a motion to accept the agenda. We'll move Director Taylor, seconded Director Miller. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we'll move right ahead. First item up is vacation and rental update. CAO Noel, here to enlighten us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did receive a petition from Missoula Lake property owners, and it's about short-term rentals. Again, big issue right across the regional district and in our member municipalities. So we wanted to make sure that the board was aware of the petition, but also we thought it'd be an opportunity for us to give an update on just where we are in that process of starting the vacation rental, short-term rental review. So we'll just turn this over to Mr. Garish, Mr. Chair, and he has a presentation for you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Garish.
Great, thank you. So we do have a presentation, and Fiona Titley, our Planner 2, will be running us through this. So just for the board's benefit before we get into it, is a lot of just background to explain some context of where the temporary use permit option came from, as we start preparing or gearing up for this vacation rental review, and just to explain some of the considerations that staff look at when these applications come in, which might help the board understand the recommendations that you see from us and why we put forward those, and just also some additional context as well. So if Fiona's online, I'm happy to pass it over to her to start the presentation.
Thank you, Chris. All right. So as Chris mentioned, I'm going to give you a bit of a background of how we ended up with using a temporary use permit as our regulatory tool of choice, and then also kind of an overview of what it looks like from staff perspective on taking an application through from intake through to the board. So, next slide, please, Danny. So originally, the regional district was operating under the idea that the short-term vacation rental use of a property was not permitted in any zone. However, after enforcement action against a property owner in electoral area E that was operating a vacation rental that we felt was operating contrary to the zoning, and the property owner felt was not contrary to the zoning, this led to a court case, which we ultimately lost, and which instigated a number of changes to our bylaws and led to the vacation rental temporary use process that we use today. Next slide. So based on the court's decision, we began updating and clarifying our bed and breakfast regulations and introducing vacation rental as a defined use in the zoning bylaw in order to distinguish its use from that of a bed and breakfast. And I believe we also made changes to the definition of our residential dwelling unit. Further, this included specifying in the zoning bylaw that vacation rentals are prohibited in all zones with the exception of Apex, and we later added Twin Lakes to that list, and that property owners could apply for permission to operate a vacation rental through the regulatory tool of a temporary use permit. As for the official community plan amendments, we took the position from a policy perspective that vacation rental uses are happening in residential neighborhoods, and the official community plans already allowed for some small scale commercial uses such as home occupation and bed and breakfast operations. So in structuring our vacation rental policies, we viewed them as a similar small scale ancillary use to the residential use of a property, with the expectation being that residential is still the primary use of the property. And that's why you might have noticed that the supportive vacation rental policy statements in the Okanagan Valley official community plans are generally under the section for residentially designated properties. Next slide, please. In addition to the policies, we wanted to come up with some criteria for evaluating applications. And these criteria were in part, they came together and were shaped by concerns that were raised by the board and by the public surrounding things like concerns about the intensity of the use, the ability to deal with bad operators, impacts from noise or garbage, etc. And that explains why now in our criteria, we require certain things like providing the contact details for property manager, septic compliance, etc. And we have struggled over the years with assessing some of these criteria. For example, the septic system compliance. Is it simply a matter of servicing, or how far do we go with ensuring that the septic system is able to accommodate the vacation rental use? And this challenge was brought to the board's attention back in 2022. However, the matter was ultimately deferred indefinitely. And over the years, the criteria and policies were amended to introduce requirements for health and safety inspections and for the holding of public information meetings as part of the permit process in response to community concerns about bad operators. For the health and safety inspections, we do offer that service in-house, and this was in part because when we first started using the temporary use permit process as our form of regulation, we wanted to get people in to get their permit. So to encourage people to do so, one of the things we felt we could provide was a discounted health and safety inspection by our building officials as a way to facilitate the application process. Next slide. Now, because we have these supportive policy statements in the Okanagan official community plans, that is why staff will generally recommend in favor of vacation rentals on residentially designated properties, if they of course meet our criteria. And in putting together the official community plan policies, I think that planning staff and the board were also trying to recognize that the Okanagan is a tourist area, that just like bed and breakfasts, Airbnbs, or vacation rentals were a use that were going to continue to occur, and they needed to be addressed, and we needed to determine how best to manage them. And the TUP process was ultimately the approach that was decided on. And we wanted to get people in to get these permits. Next slide, please. Next one, sorry. And of course, things do change over time, and some of the applications we are seeing now include situations that we hadn't perhaps not contemplated 10 years ago when we were updating our regulations. For example, we've seen applications for standalone little sleeping units, like the image on the left, or for garages or other accessory structures that were being converted into sleeping units with, a little bedroom and bathroom, such as the photo in the middle. And then we're also seeing a change as far as the form of ownership or the business form is changing. And we have started to notice that in some instances, the residential use of the property is falling away, and they are no longer meeting the definition of a vacation rental, as there is no residential use of the property, as the short-term rental use is occurring more than 6 months of the year. And that's why we are starting to see the shift towards seeing more tourist accommodation uses to describe essentially the commercial use of the property. And one example of this is the photo on the right, which is of the recent tourist accommodation application we had out in Eastgate. Next slide. So now getting to the processing procedures. For when we receive an application, take it in and it gets assigned to a file manager. Our first steps are focused on notification, and we are attempting to make the public aware of the application, and that includes having their notification sign posted on their property. And this actually happens even before an application is submitted, as we require photos of the sign in order for us to take the application in. So that means even in some instances, we're getting public feedback before we even have a file number for an application. And as well, this includes updating the application web page with some of the application materials as quickly as we can so that neighbors have somewhere to refer to if they want to learn more. This also includes notifying the director and sending out our external agency referrals to relevant agencies for vacation rentals. This most often includes Interior Health Authority, Fortis, the local fire district, and then if it happens to be in an area where an irrigation district or something like that would be relevant to refer to as well, we would do that. And then this also includes doing our public notifications of the date that the application will be considered at the board meeting. So this includes posting to our Facebook page, Voyant Alert, posting on our bulletin board at the front entrance of 101 Martin Street there, and also sending out letters to the applicant and to adjacent property owners. Next slide. For the letters and for Voyant Alert, we notify at a minimum properties within 100 meters of the property under application. So this is an example of a mailing map that we would create with the blue highlighting the 100-meter radius and then the yellow outlining all the properties that are captured within that radius for mailing or for those who have enrolled in our Voyant Alert system. Next slide. Next step, as far as assessing the application, we are looking at the intensity of the use and impact on the neighborhood, which includes things like confirmation of the capability of the septic system of accommodating the intended use, the completion of the health and safety inspection without deficiencies. We are looking to see a site plan that indicates the location of parking spaces and any screening or fencing that may be available to help mitigate the effects of the use on adjacent properties, and also a floor plan that indicates the location of the bedrooms that will be used for the vacation rental use. And this is so that we can also confirm the maximum occupancy of the vacation rental. Next slide. And as far as the general conditions that are included in the permit, these were also set out as part of the amendments to the official community plan and zoning bylaw. And the first stop point there, the one season policy goes back to concerns of bad operators. And that's why we did decide to regulate through temporary use permit, as it allows permit to expire within a relatively short period of time and the use to cease. And as well, the temporary use permit does not change the zoning of the property, so it does not establish grandfathering rights. So when someone comes back to reapply to the board could choose to deny the renewal and they have no grounds to continue the use. And for seasonal use, we refer to seasonal use as I had mentioned, the primary use of the property should still be residential. It's the vacation rental is occurring ancillary to the residential use of the property. And so at least 6 months of the year should still be that residential use. We also set out the maximum occupancy of the vacation rental, with the maximum being 2 people per bedroom with an aggregate total occupancy of 10 people being permitted. So for example, a 3-bedroom vacation rental would have a maximum of 6 guests. As well, the applicants are required to demonstrate that they can accommodate 1 parking spot per bedroom. So 5-bedroom vacation rental would require 5 parking spaces. And then we require certain information to be posted within the vacation rental, such as our vacation rental guidelines, which we provide to applicants with a copy of their approved permit, and which speaks to things like bare safety as far as putting your garbage out, conserving water, being aware of noise regulations and animal control if it's relevant to the area where the vacation rental is, and more. And then we also provide the contact information of the property manager and a copy of the permit to all neighbors within 100 meters, 100-meter radius of the property, so that should any issues arise, they have a quick point of contact to hopefully get issues resolved quickly. Next slide, please. And then once all of those criteria have been met, our assessment is complete, notification is complete, the permit has been drafted, then the application is ready to come forward for the board's consideration, and the board has options to approve, deny, or approve with conditions, or the scheduling of a public information meeting or of an advisory planning commission consideration is also at the discretion of the board. Next slide. Now, just recently, you all might recall that we obtained delegated authority to approve vacation rental renewal applications. And when determining if an application to renew or issue a vacation rental temporary use permit can be approved under delegation, we have to determine if it meets 3 criteria, being that have there been no changes to the initial permit since the previous permit was requested. So that would include if there had been an addition to the home that would be used as part of the vacation rental use. There have been no compliance issues with the original permit. And the third criteria being no representations opposing the requested permit have been submitted to the regional district within the time frame specified in the regional district's development procedures bylaw. So our development procedures bylaw provides property owners a period of 15 working days from the date of the letter to provide comments to the regional district on the renewal or reissuance application. And if all 3 of these criteria are met, the application can be approved under delegation. However, if one or more of the criteria is not met, such as if we did receive a negative representation within that 15-day period, the application would have to go to the board for consideration, and we would then prepare all of the board notices that I had mentioned in a previous slide. Next slide. And I wanted to touch briefly on bylaw enforcement. So as I'm sure you're all aware, the regional district is not out actively enforcing its land use bylaws in the sense of having a bylaw enforcement officer patrolling for infractions at all times. Rather, we rely on residents submitting written complaints. These complaints can be anonymous, cannot be anonymous, as there is always a possibility that a complainant may be required to testify in court should a situation get to that point. But we do take every precaution to ensure the anonymity of a complainant. And to one thing to clarify, I guess, as I know I've had this question before from directors, it's that complaints do not need to be made in ink or on our specific bylaw complaint form. They can also just be submitted by email. Our enforcement staff will accept that. And in practice for temporary use permits, we do tend to cease enforcement when a temporary use permit application comes in. I think because we don't want to spend resources necessarily on something that the board may ultimately approve. Next slide. So just continuing on a bit with the theme of enforcement, as I mentioned, we are reactive and require written complaints to initiate enforcement. And we are aware that there is some discontentment in the community because of this, and some people want us to be more proactive. But that would be a big policy change that we believe would need to be done in the context of the larger review of vacation rental regulations, as it would have big implications for budget and resourcing and that sort of thing. And we're also aware of community concerns surrounding vacation rentals, and we do see and hear what's going on in various communities. But on the same theme, in order to change these regulations, we're working towards doing that through this vacation rental review, and are hoping to get amendments underway soon, but are working to finish some of our other projects which are currently underway so that we can get those amendments initiated. And one note for electoral area H, at the moment, area H doesn't have anything on vacation rentals in their bylaws at the moment. And this was in part because when we were amending all of our regulations after the court case, the area H OCP had just finished being reviewed, and area H had not been included in, or to the extent of the public consultation that we did when we were creating the vacation rental regulation. So the vacation rental regulations didn't get included in area H at that time, but in this upcoming vacation rental review, it's now becoming apparent that it is important to have regulations for vacation rentals in area H. And so we will be including them, or we are proposing to include them in our review and in implementing whatever outcomes might come out of that review. Next slide. And touching more on the upcoming vacation rental review, as the board might recall, we did have a vacation rental survey, which was active in January and February of this year, with 2 separate surveys, one for the general public and one for vacation rental temporary use permit holders. The results of these surveys were presented to the board at a March planning and committee meeting. And at the end of July, we did publish our vacation rental request for proposals, which has now closed. And to be honest, we did not receive a great response to the RFP, but we are working towards finalizing an agreement with a consultant that we are interested in working with to do the project. And we are very, very hopeful that it will start towards the end of the year and that we can workshop with the board early next year to scope the project. Next slide. And as I'm sure we are not the only ones who have been seeing headlines pop up from across BC and across Canada, we have been or I guess just to say we're not alone in having to figure out what to do with short-term rentals, and we have been keeping an eye out to see what other places across Canada are doing as we see headlines pop up in the news. Next slide. And as some of you may be aware, we do know that there are provincial changes coming, but they have not yet been announced, so we can patiently wait to see what those might include. Next slide. So that's all for my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and I think Mr. Garish is also standing by to assist with helping to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Ms. Titley. Well done. A very thorough report. Any questions for either of the delegates here? Director Coyne, Senior, please, and then Director Gittins.
I guess it's not so much a question as I have a few comments. Number one, that a vacation rental is considerably different than a home-based business. So we can't work, because a home-based business, the owner is there and they're responsible. Whereas vacation rental, the owners aren't present. And so in my mind, that puts it at a totally different ballgame altogether. So I don't like the idea of using that as the grounds to allow vacation rentals. The other one that really comes out is the 100 meters radius thing. Now that may be fine, you know, if you're in, I don't know, West Bench, Culloden, more urban areas. But when you're in rural areas like in area H, for example, when you drive in the and I'm going to use Missoula Lake as an example. when you drive into the subdivision of Missoula Lake, there's only one road in, one road out. So everybody beyond that first place is affected if there's a vacation rental unit at the back end of it, because they're going to get the exposure to the traffic and all the rest of the behavior that goes along with it. So the 100-meter thing in rural settings is nowhere, in my mind, is nowhere near adequate. So that's a big thing. And then the other thing that people really throw at me out here is the security issue. So we did a little digging over the past 2 weeks, and in Area H, 70% of the landowners here are absentee landowners. So 7 out of 10 homes are empty for part of the year, which when you bring people into that area, the people that live there, out of the 3 homes that people are in, they feel that they're being exposed to people that they shouldn't be being exposed to normally, or wouldn't be, not say shouldn't be, but they wouldn't normally be being exposed to that. So when you it invites crime further down the road than just at the time that the people are there. I mean, most people that rent these places are your average Joe Schmo that wants to go on a vacation thought rather than go to a resort or motel or whatever. They all get together and they go rent one of these places and have a good time. But it's that 1% factor that comes back afterwards or raises Cain while they're there. So those are my big concerns. Yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that, because at the end of the meeting, I know that I've put forward a few motions today that they won't be considered today. They're just a notice of motion that to deal with these issues. And I know other directors are having very similar concerns that what I do. So I'll just leave it at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Coyne. Director Gettens, please.
Thank you to the chair. Just to follow up on the 100-meter, I agree as well. And even in an area like Westminster, depending on where you go, 100 meters doesn't go that far. And the 2-week timeline, if it's great if the mail, if you check your mail on a fairly regular basis, but I do think that window is too small, and think that especially when there's a renewal potential, having a board put up again, like they've already got the board from last year, throwing it up again so people can at least get a visual as they're walking by, because there are other people that get impacted by those neighborhoods, not just those direct 100 meters. So that was my one request. And my other request is that if complaints can be accepted by bylaw via email, I think that should be on our website. Right now, you have to download a PDF, fill it in, scan it, resend it. So I just think that we should add on the website that citizens can just email that into, because I get that question all the time. And thanks for the update. And I just wanted to ask too, I thought that there was a presentation made by our staff at some time before my time about why the TUP is not the right tool. Am I remembering that correctly? No, you didn't present that somewhere at a conference or something like that? No? Sorry, Chair, can you just ask the staff? I thought you gave me I thought I have a report somewhere about why TUPs don't work for vacation rentals, but maybe I'm not remembering that right.
Mr. Garish, do you have a?
Sure. So to the best of my recollection, I did present at a UBCM seminar on vacation rentals. And it wasn't so much that vacation rentals weren't a proper or appropriate tool, it's just that they're very labor intensive and there's a lot of steps to them. And if you're dealing with high volumes like some municipalities might be, a temporary use permit might not be the best option. But then of course, municipalities are somewhat different because they have the business licensing option, which we don't have. And so there's trade-offs with it. It's not that one is inappropriate versus not appropriate. It's just, yeah, it might not be the best fit for your local government.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't misremembering. Thanks.
Thank you. One point I want to make, complaints must be written. We should get that on our piece too. Director Monteith, please.
And through the chair, I have a few questions. One specifically about Twin Lakes. I don't believe that Twin Lakes was I guess, given that green light on vacation rentals, because we do see applications from Twin Lakes through the TUP process. So I'm just looking for clarity on that one first.
Mr. Garish, please.
Sure, through the chair. So Twin Lakes, to be more specific, it would be the Twin Lakes Village zone that applies to the area around the existing golf club clubhouse. Not the whole of Twin Lakes. It's that mixed use zone that also already allows for residential and short-term tourist accommodation in the form of, I think, hotel, motel, campground, and so vacation rental was seen to be akin to those, and the applicant made a request to have it included as part of the most recent rezoning of that land, and that was agreed to by the board. So.
Thank you. And just to follow up, maybe we can change the language to say that specific area, Twin Lakes, because I think it might be confusing to the public. And to follow up on the 100 meter, I believe we changed that in our communication policy, that it was like 300 meters. And I believe, based on conversation, that was sort of implied that it would apply also to temporary use permits. Is that correct?
Mr. Garish?
I'm not aware of that. I know we have had discussions about the radius for land use notifications. And I guess the point I would make to the board is that the way we've written ours is it's no less than 100 meters. So we do have the ability to expand it at a staff level. However, generally when we look at expanding it, it's for, say, larger size parcels, right? So the small holding zones, large holding zones, ag zones. If we're dealing with residential zones, which is primarily where we're seeing the vacation rentals, those tend to be on smaller lots, more dense. And so the 100 meters, for the most part, is what we use in those situations. It's the other more rural parcels that get the bigger radius.
Thank you. If I may, I believe part of that expansion of zone was to deal with radio towers. Are you, anything else, Director Monteith?
One more. One of the struggles I have with vacation rentals is the official community plan language supporting vacation rentals. And I don't believe my community does. So I believe that that is a really large step we need to look at, and that if the official community plan supports vacation rental, but as a board and as a community we don't, that is a big miss. So I would like to see that language changed, and that, you know, through, you know, public consultation, the process unfolding, you know, every application should be looked at it at its own merits, not just that blanket statement of our OCP supporting vacation rentals.
Mr. Garish?
We agree, and that's what we're hopeful to get out of the vacation rental review, is that we have policies that are more reflective of where the board is at on this issue.
Thank you. Ms. Rodrigo, please. And then Mr. Taylor.
Yep, thank you through the chair. So a couple of comments and a quick question. So there's a website called AirDNA. So I put in, so it's technically designed to help vacation rental owners with pricing their house within the market. So I threw in Naramata. There's 137 active STR listings. Now that's some of the motel rooms and that's some B&Bs where people are on site. But I'm pretty sure we only have about 14 temporary use permits that are out there. So there's a big disconnect there. And it is very much commercial, where the average daily rate is about $400. So we are definitely using housing as a commercial entity. And if anyone would like, I can show you a map in a lot of pretty blue dots that I would hope would be full-time housing, but are currently commercial enterprises. So there's that. I guess I'm also frustrated that I have Naramata Slow, who's been asking to come to the board for over a year to talk about a petition that was done in Naramata, and they haven't been able to come voice their opinion. So it's great that Missoula Lake was able to piece that together, but I think we need to be hearing from some of these other groups that are putting in hard work to show that this is an issue, which we clearly definitely all know it is. And my question in there is that respecting privacy, but is there a way to get bylaw complaints to come to the board when these when TUPs come up, so we can see that, or up for renewal, so we can see what's taking place?
Pardon me, Mr. Garish?
So I'll start with the last question, and I'll be frank. I mean, we struggle with the complaint process sometimes in relation to these, because you know, as the board is aware, I think there's been a couple instances where I don't want to say frivolous complaints were made, but we received a complaint and the bylaw officer went out and determined that there was no infraction. And so in those situations, it's a challenge for us to then bring those forward for the board to look at, because, you know, obviously then we get pushback from the applicant, say, why are you raising something that was deemed to be not an issue that's punitive against my, like it's hurting my application. Or if we receive a complaint that's, yes, it is related to that property and there was something to it, but it may be unrelated to the vacation rental operation itself. And so to what degree are we, you know, holding this application for one particular use to an issue that may be unrelated? But certainly if there is something specific to the vacation rental that was deemed to be an issue that has brought it before us through bylaw enforcement, we do try to put those into the report, albeit under the background section, but it's there. Sorry, I can't recall if there was that was the one question? Okay.
Thank you. Director Taylor, please.
Yep. I think everybody knows that I'm concerned about this policy issue, short-term accommodation. And I'm also concerned on the flip side because I'm concerned at the impact it has on long-term accommodation. That said, you know, we can tweak what we've got, and that costs staff time. Or we can ask staff to prioritize and accelerate and maybe assist them with whatever human resource they might need in order to do that, so that we get to the new solution instead of tweaking the old one, which probably isn't a long-term solution anyway. So that's not a question. I guess the question would be, you know, through the chair to Mr. Garish, how long would it take you to get the results of your review through to the board if we were to give you the necessary prioritization and additional resource?
Garish, please.
I feel within the department we have the resources to undertake this project, but there's certain aspects of it that we can't do. And so that was what the RFP was related to. And at this point, as a preliminary step, really what we need help with, we feel, is the background research to understand like what actually is occurring out within the electoral areas. You know, as Director Federico has said, there's X amount within Naramata, but we don't know for sure what the other electoral areas are cumulatively in relation to the housing stock, what are the potential impacts, and then based on that information, we're hopeful. And of course, this is dependent on other projects such as RGS, area EOCP, ESDP, and subdivision servicing bylaw, hopefully being brought to conclusion. Coming forward in Q1 to the board and presenting this background information and saying, you know, here's the situation as we see it. You know, we'll probably reemphasize our current process. I mean, yes, there are other options, but again, there's trade-off to the other options. I mean, rezoning is certainly a way to go, but rezoning entrenches use rights that become grandfathered, and it makes it very difficult for the board to stop a potential user, right? So present that information Q1, scope the project with the board, and see what direction it is that you want to go with in relation to vacation rentals. And so at this point, that's the best I can offer, and that's kind of what we're aiming for, but it's dependent on other projects being completed so that we can free up staff resources for this one.
Thank you. Director Taylor?
Yeah, then just a comment. I see that being relatively quick, and I mean, I share the other directors' concerns about the 100 yards and the timelines and all that, and more. But I hesitate to ask to have, unless there were some quick fixes that can be done without a bunch of staff time, I just don't want to detract from the bigger picture or the ultimate solution. Not to sound like Clint Eastwood or anything like that.
Thank you. Any comment on that, Mr. Garish?
No, other than to just restate what I think I've told the board on multiple occasions in the past, there's invariably a cascading effect with these amendment bylaws. And sure, there's probably Band-Aid things that we could do, but when you start looking at the bylaw and making one change, it potentially leads to another change and another in order to get it right. And then, you know, next thing we know, we're into indirectly a full-scale review, right? So we would prefer to try to prioritize this as part of the project that we have lined up already.
Thank you. Director Holmes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So in Summerland, we also have a whack more listings on Airbnb than there are actual licensed providers. And so our issue is tracking, and also, you know, once these places, they're booked for the summer, they take their listing off Airbnb. So you go and try and enforce it, and they say, well, we're not renting it out. It's not listed, but we know there's paying customers in there, and so you get into enforcement issues there. It becomes very difficult to enforce, and even if you are able to enforce it, I mean, we can fine what, like $400 a day max, and they're renting out a house for $2,500 a day. It becomes the cost of doing business as far as the, you know, just to circumvent, just pay the fine. So my question is, will the review look at bylaw enforcement and how we can, approach that, and how are we doing now with bylaw enforcement with these sort of things? I really think we need that provincial legislation. The provincial legislation needs to address some of these things, but I'm just wondering where we're at right now with it.
Mr. Garish?
Well, I know from my perspective, and it's not that I'm trying to punch it to a different department, but in thinking about this review and what form it could take and the outcomes that might result, I do feel that the board is going to have some discussions. We're going to have to make some decisions around its enforcement approach to vacation rentals, and that's going to be a big part of this review, because of course we are reactive. We are dependent on complaints coming in. We know there's probably that disconnect between the 20 or 30 permits we've issued in Naramata versus 140 that it sounds like are operating. And that comes down to, I think, our enforcement approach and how do we get people to come in for the permit. And if we're reactive, that gap is probably going to persist. But if we take a more proactive approach, but again, there's trade-offs with that because I suspect it will require more staff. But in terms of our current approach or how things are going with vacation rentals, I might.
It's definitely an evolving enforcement process. Just with more of them coming online, it's becoming a bigger issue. So we did have some success. We had some bigger issues. Obviously, there's more complaints coming in from the public regarding a few of them, some in Naramata and others in Okanagan Falls. We issued a lot of fines, upwards of $4,000 to $5,000 in total. So, but it does take us actually going out, trying to find someone renting it, admitting to renting it, so we have that proof. So if it does get appealed, we have that proof on file. So it is very labor intensive. We often miss them. So we try to align with the neighbors or somebody to let us know when they're there to make sure our resources are being used efficiently. But yeah, if we did a proactive approach, it would definitely tax us a lot more, and we'd have to look at additional staffing.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. Any Director Taylor, please.
Yeah, this is getting down the road, but I think if you did a proactive approach, or if you have more consequences on people that are flouting the bylaw, you're not going to have to hit everybody. I think the word will get out, and people would be more gun shy if it's meaningful. That's my thought anyway.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Any other questions for our panel? Director Coyne, please.
I guess this would be for Chris. In the last one that just went through at Eastgate that the board authorized, there was a lot of confusion within the community on that, because a lot of people had sent in complaints. The complaints went to the complaint department, and they stopped at the complaint department and they don't get referred over to planning. And that caused a great deal of dissension within the community, because when they watched it online and they said there was no negative feedback, there was negative feedback, but it went to the wrong place. So I think that one of the things we could possibly do to really help with that problem is, even if we stuck with the 100-meter circle, which I think, maybe we could expand that to 200 out in those areas or whatever. But if we sent them now, Fiona showed me yesterday online that we have an online brochure that tells people the proper process and the proper place to send the feedback. If we included that with the letter that we sent to people, at least the people in the neighborhood would know the proper place to send the letter, and it wouldn't get stuck in the wrong department. That would be a really simple, cost-effective fix for people not knowing where to send it. Because I get phone calls every day. My phone's been ringing off the hook for the last 3 weeks on this, and it's all about how do we make our voice heard. So that would just be a simple suggestion to the procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. Our clock's ticking on this, but are there any other questions for the panel at this point? I do have a couple of comments. Area C is not really too dependent on this. Without any big wet area, we don't have the push for these vacation rentals. They're mostly centered around the wineries, which create a different situation than what's happening in, say, Naramata or even in Eastgate. So there's an issue there. But if we have a policy and it directs people to check a bunch of boxes to be able to apply for this, for a vacation rental TUP, and then we deny it, are we, there's a great cost involved in this. Are we opening the door to further legal action, down the road? When we have a policy, it kind of kicks it into a place where we're agreeing that this is possible. But, if all the boxes are checked and we're saying, no, I think we've got a problem, we definitely need to change the policy or what's written. And it may have to be area specific too. More and more though, and kind of one of the things I saw was in area H, these things are falling outside of the primary residence qualification part of this TUP thing. Like, they're actually becoming actually a short-term hotel, for lack of a better way of doing it, because they were never a residence. So, and do we have any way of actually enforcing anything here, given the court ruling that we went through? And I think I might as well direct that one at CAO Newell.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, I guess. So the reason we initiated the temporary use permit for vacation rentals was because of the Naramata file that Mr. Garish mentioned. It was never intended to be a proactive enforcement approach. It was always to try and catch the troublemakers. And that's why we do it just on the complaint basis. We understand that there's many residences out there that are doing some form of vacation rental or short-term rental. But it's a matter of us trying to find some mechanism in order to put rules on those that are causing problems. The ones that aren't causing problems, sure, it would be beneficial if they registered, but it's not our primary concern on this. It's about trying to catch those that are imposing on their neighbors and not managing their vacation rental well. So that would be part of the research, I believe, is to try and identify what tools are out there that we can use, which has the least adverse impact on the organization and the surrounding residents, and that would allow us to enforce when enforcement's necessary. So I know it would be of interest to the board to come up with a short-term solution on this, but it's the iceberg effect, trying to resolve the underlying problems with a quick fix I don't believe is going to be beneficial for us. We really need to do the research and find what tools we have and what the impacts of each are and look at the options. And that's going to take some work and some time.
Thank you, CEO O'Neill. With that, I think we best move along. We have a update on tiny homes. So let's move to that. CEO O'Neill, do you want to do the intro, please?
Sure. I'm just going to say we do have the RCMP delegation at 10, Mr. Chair. So we're somewhat limited with our 6 minutes left on your committee. But this one here, obviously housing generally is of interest to us, and we're looking at options. One of the prospects is the use of tiny homes in various areas. And the town of Oliver submitted a resolution through UBCM a year or so ago to try and make tiny homes compliant with the building code. And we now have the provincial response on that, which basically says they don't set size limits on houses. It's just that the building code is set to enforce safety, and they will apply the building code to any sort of residential development. So, and I know there's still work being done. There's still an advocacy to try and get the building code to recognize tiny homes, but it's more about what goes into the tiny home in order to make them safe that the province is looking at. So that doesn't seem to be the resolution to the issue unless a tiny home can be brought up to the standards of the building code. But I know Mr. Garish has another presentation here, but I'm just not sure he can do it in the 4 minutes. He can? Oh, okay, so he says he can. So we should turn it over to him, Mr. Chair.
Let her rip, Mr. Garish.
I will. I'm going to set a record here for speed, but I will say, like, where the next item, which is the housing strategy, is not time sensitive, and so if that needs to be bumped, that's fine, at least from staff's perspective. So for tiny homes, and again, this is just background context for the board, and so I just wanted to start with a quick overview, and I apologize quoting definitions from a zoning bylaw. I enjoy that, but it is pretty dry stuff. But so when it comes to manufactured homes, because sometimes people feel that the tiny home, quote unquote, falls into this, but our definition of manufactured home requires that it meet a Canadian Standards Association certification, right? So a modular home is shorthand, we call it A277. Factory built, assembled on site, in sections, looks like a house is the top example. The Z240, shorthand for the mobile, again, it's built in a factory setting, a little bit more transportable than a modular, but both can theoretically be picked up and relocated easily. We do have a definition for recreational vehicle, and as you might expect, it covers what I think most people would consider to be an RV, and I've got some examples shown here on the side. But I've emphasized here, it also includes a park model trailer. And so a park model trailer can meet a CSA standard Z241, but it's not really meant for year-round residential habitation. And so just looking at the visual here, you can see, I think, at least my understanding, that's generally what a tiny home looks like, and it usually falls into that park model classification. So the board has brought this up on occasion in the past. We had the director's motion from 2021 asking us to bring forward options in relation to mobile tiny homes. And then also from late last year, earlier this year, the 2023 strategic priorities, affordable housing, facilitating a diverse range of housing and accommodation. And so an outcome of that strategic direction or priority was for staff to bring forward a discussion paper, which we did March 3rd, 2023. I think there's like a dozen different items within there for the board to consider, one of which was the tiny home discussion, and I'll spend some more detail quickly on these top points, but we essentially said put it off until we hear from the province. So again, tiny homes, you know, our understanding in the planning department, it's usually a residential use of an RV, car, or trailer. The concerns that we have is that, you know, it's never quite clear to us in all situations if it's properly been connected to basic infrastructure such as water and sewer. We can't issue building permits for them, so we don't know if it's complying with the code for health and safety considerations. And sometimes there's issues around zoning in terms of being placed on a property contrary to allowable density or where accessory dwellings aren't allowed. The opposite of that, it's not a tiny home, but it's a home that's small. which I would argue is basically your typical apartment townhouse suite. And it's even possible for a stick-built house to be considered small. The only issues that we have in relation to the land use bylaws are we do require a 5-meter width requirement for a principal dwelling, which I think came up recently in relation to that DVP in Caledon. They didn't meet that requirement, but applied strictly to a small home, that does set out a minimum 25 square meter size. So that's about as small as you can get with a house stick-built in the zoning bylaw. The medium density zones have a similar requirement for the minimum size of an apartment or a townhouse. I've shown an example here just from Apex for illustrative purposes. I was trying to think of like where we have small houses. That one came to mind. Again, just a brief summary of Oliver's UBCM resolution. So basically my takeaway was the town was asking the province to amend the building code to make allowances so that tiny homes, quote unquote, could be permitted and allowed. The province has come back and basically said no, they're not contemplating changes to the building code. The expectation from the province is that you meet the code. Not meeting the code compromises health and safety and environmental considerations, so no changes are coming. And so when we had presented to the board in February, we said, it would probably be beneficial to wait to see what the province has said. The province has now spoken. There's no changes coming forward. So on that basis, at a staff level, we feel status quo should prevail. There's not really any changes for us to respond to in terms of making changes to the zoning bylaws. So that's why it's before you for information. And that's it for my presentation. 2 minutes, 3 minutes left for any questions that the board might have. And yeah.
Sorry, Ms. Rodrigo, please.
It's like, okay. Yeah, I'm not going to go on a soapbox for 2 minutes. So I just want to bring to light that the regional district or Sunshine Coast Regional District has no minimum floor space requirement for their housing. So I don't know if that's something that we can look at doing. And they're also looking at bringing in temporary use permits for housing for RVs and tiny homes because they've recognized that we are in a housing challenge and that there are ways that we can put parameters in place for this. So there is, as Mr. Newell has alluded to, that there is an advocacy group that's working on this. There are ways to work within the CSA codes to allow this, so that is coming. But if staff could take a peek at the Sunshine Coast, and I will keep you all apprised of that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rodrigo. Mr. Coyne, Director Coyne.
Yeah, this one, I guess, would be for Chris. When it comes down to a lot of these things, it comes down to that letter from Interior Health that says that these RVs and tiny homes and whatever aren't, they're not healthy to live in. Would it be possible at a future date for somebody from IH to come and explain that rationale? Because I have people here that live in these things that they've spent upwards to $400,000 to buy these gigamongous motorhomes that they live in. And I'd really like to understand what's unsafe about them versus a small house. Thanks.
Quickly, Mr. Garish.
Sure, happy to reach out to staff at IHA and gauge their interest in coming to the board.
Sure. Not seeing any other questions. We have regional housing strategy will postpone for a later date. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the planning development. Moved Director Taylor, seconded Director Van Alpen. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, back to Chair Pendergraft. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Knodel. That brings us to the Protective Services Committee, and I'm going to go to Director Roberts to chair this one, as the delegation, I believe, is here.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to call this meeting in order of the Protective Services Committee. The time is 10 a.m. and we're just waiting for a delegation to come in. But anybody, could I have a motion to accept our agenda? Okay, thank you. Second it? Yep. And all in favor? Perfect. And then we will turn it over to the CAO as soon as he comes in with our delegation.
Yeah.
You bet.
So have is the CIO coming back in? Or not? Okay. So I'd like to introduce our delegation of the RCMP with Sergeant Vanomatic. We'll open up the meeting to yourself. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And as always, through the chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and chat with you today. We'll be presenting a lot of the statistics regarding April to June 2003. So I acknowledge and ask for forgiveness for kind of the late presentation here on this. These are basically spring statistics. But at the same time, I was going to present I think maybe in August or in September, and we had a bit of a fire season, and then we had a rock fall, and then there was some meetings in Vancouver, I think everybody went to. So here we are. So let's embrace this opportunity, and we have some numbers for you. So we'll just start with, if you don't mind, we'll start with Penticton. I did present those municipal statistics to the Penticton Mayor and Council here a couple weeks ago. Just a quick overview of that. Our statistics looks relatively good with a lot of our property crime down. We attribute that to some of a couple things, our thumb on our prolific offenders, as well as some enhanced resourcing we got from Mayor and Council from the last council and this council, and basically allowing us to use our resources efficiently and promptly. So I'll present now to the rural statistics. Sorry, just let me go back to our priorities. So our priorities are pretty consistent year over year. We do crime reduction, so property crime and drugs, family and sexual violence. We pay attention to our homelessness, addictions, and mental health. That's quite newsworthy lately, and our employee wellness. And again, it's hard to look after the community if we're not looking after our members. So it's one of our priorities, definitely. So our rural statistics for Q2, our total calls for service are relatively down, just by a couple of dozen, but regardless, that is noteworthy. Our assault and violent crime is up a little bit from 10 to 18, and again from 19 to 24 from year to date. We attribute that to a little bit of, the nicer weather. There's some, I don't want to say homeless, but there's some people that put up a camp just east of OK Falls, up on one of the 4 service roads. So that is attributing to a little of these statistics a bit. Domestic violence is up again a little bit, from like 6 to 8 for the year or 3 to 5 for the quarter. But some of those are the same couple that generate, more than one call. And so when looking at property crime, relatively stable. Our break-enters are down significantly. Our break-enters for business are down. Our theft from vehicles are up. Our auto thefts are up. Bicycle thefts are up. But again, from 1 to 5 or 2 to 5, those are relatively, I won't say insignificant numbers, but they are manageable. And again, we attribute to some of the crime group, the unorganized crime group that kind of are harbored up in rural areas, and they want to get out of town because we do keep a thumb on them. It's easier for us to keep a thumb on them here, and they get up in the bush and commit some crime or take the crime up there with them, steal here or in relative other communities, and then harbor that stuff up in the bush. So if we dissect the communities that are in the regional district near Penticton Rural, we got Naramata, whose statistics are down significantly, in some cases 100%. So there's, again, Naramata is remarkable in that there's very little crime going on in that quarter there. Look at Cleveland, again, down. We have some statistics that are down 100%. You know, but we talk about numbers breaking into residence from 1 to 0. There was a theft, you know, 1 theft to 2 thefts. It looks like it's up 100%, but it really, overall, crime in Caledon is down significantly. Okanagan Falls, our violent crime is down significantly. You know, property crime, I would suggest, is down also significantly. You know, again, break and enters, really none reported over that period. Shoplifting's down. So property crime's down, you know, 30%. And so that ends the Penticton rural. So what I was thinking is perhaps if we could save the questions for everyone till the end, so we can just kind of go through everyone. Is that okay through the chair?
I think that'll be just fine, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So then we'll move on to Summerland. Unfortunately, there was no delegation from Summerland here today. They were, Sergeant Preston is out of the country actually, and then they were kind of operationally short. So I said that I would cover Summerland's numbers here. Again, just to remind you, that's a municipal service, so no real direct link to the RDOS outside of of course, the Summerland delegation. But again, if we look, calls for service are up a bit. Our domestic violence is up, but I do want to say that some of those numbers are directly related to one couple or two couples that just we're trying to get them help. But sometimes they just they won't embrace the opportunities. And then if we looked at thefts from vehicles, in speaking to the Summerland members, they believe that there were some traveling criminals that just went through Summerland and were checking car doors, and our frauds are up significantly, but those for the most part are phone fraud. So those are people being targeted through the phone. And again, always remind yourselves and your constituents that the Canada Revenue Agency nor the RCMP take Google Play cards as payment. So please keep that in mind for anybody that that gets a phone call and starts looking for Google Pay cards or whatever. That is not a method of payment. So although it says criminal code and drug are up 22% in Summerland, again, that I think that should be just kind of put in perspective a bit comparatively to other communities. Summerland's a very safe place, and these numbers can get skewed by a very small portion of a population. So with that said, I'm going to move it over to Princeton. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Sergeant Neil Potter. He's new in Princeton. He's our new detachment commander in Princeton. We're very excited to have him here. He came from Montreal, and so it's a bit of a culture shock, if you will. I'm sure traffic suddenly got a lot easier for him. So I'll turn it over to Sergeant Potter, and he can speak to the Princeton statistics.
All right, with my broken English here. Yeah, I just got here about a month ago, so I'll go over these stats. Brought my 2IC here to help me out because he's a lot more aware of what's going on in Princeton, but I'll do my best to kind of give you the numbers here. So total calls for service are up for this quarter. Probably not, like if you look at the total for the year, they're the same. So I'm thinking probably just the calls were kind of shifted, probably a busier spring than what we're used to. So that's probably what happened there. Most numbers are pretty low, so that affects percentages quite fast. Assault is down. Sex offenses are down to 0 from 4, so down 100%, which is a good thing, I guess. Violent crime total is down. We have uttering threats who seem to be up from 7 to 9. But yeah, I think these numbers are fairly acceptable in a way. Property crime, the numbers that hit here are auto theft, 2 to 7, so which it brings it up 250%. We went over with Kyle. We went over these files. Doesn't seem like it's a local problem. Like I don't think it's something that's recurrent, or at least they don't have not a group of people who specialize in auto theft at all. It's more like the odd situation where somebody will end up stealing a vehicle, which isn't minor, but like I have a few examples here, but I mean it's more like isolated situations where somebody leaves with a car and with the intent of stealing it, but that it wasn't planned in such a way. So I don't think that there's a major issue here of auto theft for the Princeton area. Probably some related to I guess arguments and you know, between people who know each other. So yeah, if that comes back more often in the future, maybe we can address that further. But for now, I think it's more you know, like isolated situations where somebody would leave with a vehicle, just to leave town, basically, more than to steal a vehicle. Bike theft is down, break and enter, everything's down. Mischief, our theft is up quite a bit, 57% from 7 to 11. Again, we went over these files and like they're pretty minor. Like it's mostly theft, I'd say, of opportunity where, you know, there's stuff lying around and somebody walks by and grabs it. Or again, in a situation where there's some kind of a feud or an argument between people who know each other and they end up leaving with property and a complaint is filed after that. We have shoplifting up 100%, but it's from one to two, and it seems to be at the grocery store. So again, not too bad. I think these guys are doing a good job also for prevention there. Theft of, like, all the other numbers are down really. Yeah, and our total calls for service are mainly traffic incidents and check well-being. So yeah, unless I'll be willing to answer any questions after that, but I think that pretty much sums it up for Princeton. Thank you. Anything to add, Kyle?
Do you want to address questions in regards to specifically Princeton, if there's any? There isn't any. Okay, perfect.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Neil. So we're going to do Karamias now. Corporal Parsons sends his regrets. He's unable to attend this morning, so I'm going to run those numbers through for you here. Overall, our total criminal code for the Karamias in this quarter were down 35%. And again, although the calls for service were up, the total criminal code and drug were down. So remarkable was the uttering threats. A lot of these are from people that know each other, that get into some kind of argument and then escalate to a threat. Our sex offenses are up through the year. Some of those can be encapsulated in downloading child pornography. We have a good investigative setup for that through not only the Penticton area, but also through the BC RCMP, the E Division ICE unit. And as we look at property crime, it also looks good. You know, shoplifting is down 100%, thefts down 67%, mischiefs down 50%. Break and enter residence went up from 100%, but from 1 to 2. So these some of these percentages can be misconstrued. Theft from vehicle again down a bit for the quarter, but year to date they're up a little bit. So just reminding people, even if you live in Karamias, please lock your car doors and don't keep anything of value in there. In particular, you know, your purses and anything of inherent value. And overall, again, property crime is down, you know, 43%. So that's a significant change. Calls for service, you know, it's around traffic and assist general public and alarms. So Karamias remains quite a pleasant place to live. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Big Sergeant Rigglesworth over there. I'm sure he's always got something to say. So, Don, take it away.
No comment. Thank you. Oliver continues to focus on road safety. Part of one of our annual performance plans priorities is focused on speeding. The Oliver residents in the rural area may have noticed a lot more vehicle stops, especially on the highway as you're getting north of Gallagher Lake. It's almost a poaching zone, really. It's really easy, but I have some keen people that were working, have been coming in from other areas just to help slow people down. I just don't want that horrific accident, and we luckily avoided one very recently, not in Q1, but a car full of young men from the high school, age 16 and 17, awful accident, and they walked away pretty much unscathed, thankfully. But it's speed and high performance vehicles and young people don't seem to mix. Anyway, here I am fulfilling Staff Sergeant's prediction. I'll get to the stats. Total criminal code and drug stats in the rural area were up to 189 from 143 in Q2 compared to 2022. The ones that I want to focus on that stood out, I've already discussed these with Director Knodel, is the domestic violence. It was up to 5 from 2 in the previous year. I looked closely at these 5 files, and we really are guided with rules of how we look at these. We don't have leeway. We really focus on protecting the victim on domestic violence files. One of them that was quite serious is with the courts and working through it. Another 2 of them, the victim did not want to proceed. They didn't provide information. There was information on one of them that we were able to gather through evidence at the scene, through 911 calls, and we put forward what we can, the best we can, without the victim's cooperation. And there's another charge that is with the courts and with Crown Counsel. Through all of these, if there's evidence, maybe not enough to go to court, maybe it's an argument that got a little bit out of hand, our officers monitor those. We have check-ins with the people. We make sure that things are going smoothly. And I just want to commend our victim services that we have in working in Oliver and Osoyoos. They work with these individuals, with the victims of a crime, and they get them through the court process, and they spend hours, and they're a lot more attached to these people than a police officer gets, because they're sitting with them, they counsel them, they take phone calls all the time. So I just want to do a shout out to our victim services ladies, Tina and Cheryl. The other one that pops out is our break and enters. It went from 1 in 2022 to 5. It was alarming until I looked at them a little bit closer. 2 of these break and enters to residences, one was a trailer where it was a friend who was a former roommate, broke into the trailer after having moved out and stole a bunch of tools. We did forward charges, and there's a warrant outstanding on that file. Another one actually ended up being a false report. The landlord failed to tell their tenant that the painters were coming, and didn't really screw our stats, but I thought it was kind of one of those things. Another one, a former vineyard worker broke into a vineyard worker's, her previous residence. It was about a month after she moved out. She broke in through a window and took her own things out of that trailer. Another one, front door of a residence was left open. Person just went in, reached in the front door, grabbed a set of car keys and stole a car in the driveway. So I just want to remind people to lock up. We continue to look at a couple residences in the rural area. There are some repeat, or we call them prolific offenders, and we've identified some individuals in certain properties where we continuously seem to be recovering items, and we're going through with charges. It was quite interesting that I think it made the news that an Oliver resident was arrested in Kelowna stealing a vehicle from a car dealership, and there was a bit of a pursuit going on. This gentleman's in custody, and we have other charges with him. He was also linked with the thefts of the water pumps from the Willowbrook Fire Hall. So we're just going to keep piling it on and hopefully have them suitably housed in another residence that's in rural Oliver, which, yeah, so the Okanagan Correctional Center is probably what's reflected here in the assaults going from 23 to 28. Every assault fight in the jail that we get, sometimes we have an investigation, it's great video. We'll get statements. A lot of times individuals don't want anything to do with the police when they're in custody, but the jail needs that file number for their recording purposes. So we do what we can there, but it does skewer stuff a little bit when we have a jail in our rural area.
Thanks, Don. Next will be a Soyuz and Sergeant Jason Beta.
Thank you to the board and the chair for having us. We always like coming here to present our stats, and I'm going to just touch base really quickly on the municipal stats. I didn't have a chance to present those to my town. I see Mayor McCordoff is present, so I'd like to present those really quickly. Violent crime down across the board for this quarter compared to the same quarter of the previous year, which is really good. Numbers are always low when it comes to any violent crime in a Soyuz, but we never like to see any increase whatsoever. Property crime is in the town and in the rural area for Soyuz has always been our main type of crime, whether it's theft from vehicles or theft of vehicles, mischief to property or break and enters. It always seems to be a property crime element. So we saw a bit of an increase from 10 to 18 in mischief to property. 38% of those mischiefs were related to disturbance disputes, so disputes between neighbors and things like that, where it's called mischief, but it's the loss of enjoyment of your property. We had very slight increase up by 2 on theft from vehicle. 63% of those thefts were involved thefts from the exterior of the vehicle, primarily license plates. So theft of vehicle is down, but it doesn't really necessarily reflect anything different that we're doing compared to other towns. I looked at some of the stats from other towns, and their theft of vehicles are up. But what we're really seeing is a lot of these traveling criminals through the South Okanagan corridor were finding vehicles that are stolen maybe from Oliver or Soyuz found in Kelowna or Penticton or vice versa. So at least those stats can really be skewed. Just depends on where the criminals decide to take the vehicle from. So overall, the stats in the municipality are really good. I'm really pleased about them, even though we had a few extra calls compared to the previous year. Rural Soyuz, we saw violent crime go up a bit. Assaults went from 0 in 22 of the quarter 2 to 8, which is a significant increase. So I obviously looked at those files in depth to see, because when we put our stats in here for assault, we're looking at common assault, but we're also looking at assault with weapons or that cause bodily harm. Thankfully, none of these assaults occurred with the use of a weapon or that caused bodily harm. 88% of the assaults involved assailants that are known to each other. A lot of times they're family members or landlord-tenant disputes, things like that. And they were all extremely minor in nature. I mean, assault's never really minor, but we're talking, a little bit of pushing and shoving and stuff like that. So nothing that got to the point of charges. Close to 40% of those also involved alcohol. So we know that when we mix alcohol, sometimes we don't make the best choices. So uttering threats went from 0 to 6, and those are included in, those were part of the same files. They're people arguing, threatening to do something, and then they get into a bit of push and shove. So the property crime in the rural area was remarkably low compared to the previous year, which is good. We did see a slight increase to mischief to property, but again, that came from disputes between neighbors and the loss of enjoyment to property. So we had overall 1 break and enter in the rural area, which is really low. And that involved the seasonal property. So we have a lot of seasonal properties in the South Okanagan. And I'd just like to remind people that, you know, when these places are left vacant for an extended period of time, especially when we're in a rural area where our neighbors aren't so close and can't see your home or your property so easily, there are ways to protect yourself. And I know money always comes into it for a lot of people, but there's ways to get security systems for your house where you don't have to pay for the monitoring. I mean, monitoring is great, but you don't have to pay for that if it's a money issue. You can certainly buy an inexpensive security system for your house that links to your cell phone, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're down the street or you're on the other side of the world, you can monitor your house. If you see someone on your cameras, you can call a neighbor, you can call the police and just have them check it out. The theft other, we had one incident where tools were stolen from a trailer that was at a construction site. We had a barbecue propane tank stolen and an excavator bucket stolen. So kind of odd little things that people will take. But then we had a couple theft from vehicles, and those involved license plates again. What we're seeing a lot is when a vehicle is stolen from a given area, criminals know that when we run that license plate, it's on a system as stolen and it's going to be flagged to us right away. So a lot of times what they'll do is if they steal a Dodge pickup truck, they're going to go to another town or another area and steal a license plate from a Dodge pickup truck usually of the same color. So they'll put that on there because a lot of people don't recognize or don't notice that their license plates are stolen. So when we run a plate, if we run a plate because the vehicle's acting suspicious and it comes back to a Dodge pickup truck, black in color, and if that's what that plate is on, we don't know it's stolen unless we were to stop it and check that VIN. So it's so we do see a lot of license plates stolen, and so I just ask people, just keep an eye on those. Know your license plates, check them each morning, and if it's either missing or it's replaced with a different plate, because that's what they'll do as well. Let us know right away, and at least that way we'll have a better opportunity of finding the vehicle that plate may now be on. So. Other than that, very pleased with the stats in the municipality and rural area. Again, it's a pleasure to work in a community that really is low on violence and property crime. We can always work on through education, through the public, about how to prevent ourselves from being victims of property crime. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So through the chair now, we'd like to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Vetamanik. I have Director Johansson.
Thank you, Chair. Couple things. Yeah, just the over passengering with young adults. Definitely see a lot of that going on in that accident. I'm surprised nobody was injured, let alone killed in that accident. So enforcement of that, I think, is something that should be taken seriously. One question I do have is I'm just wondering how long and how much time it takes dealing with abandoned 911 calls. Seeing lots of them throughout there, and everybody's probably phoning through cell phones, being able to determine where that call came from. I'm just wondering how much time is being taken by the various departments.
Yeah, through the chair, Jason wants to answer that, so. We'll be chair to chair here. And we'll...
The reason I want to touch on this is because it is always one of the top calls we get in a Soyuz. So we get the similar calls that the other towns get, where it's the pocket dial. We also had one, and it's becoming more frequent, where Siri, if someone presses their Siri button accidentally on their iPhone, and they're talking to someone about, should we call the police or should we not? They're talking about it. Siri will sometimes it'll pick it up and call the police. So we're seeing that happening more and more with the type of technology that people are carrying around in their pockets these days. The other issue is when we get a 911 call, a lot of times it's come when we really try and decipher where that came from. It's coming from a radius of a tower, a cell tower. So it's very difficult to determine exactly where it is. In a Soyuz, a lot of our 911 calls are coming from the US. And so they'll hit off our towers, and then we have to determine by getting back to that person. And a lot of times it's fairly obvious because it's an American number. we'll find out they're from Oroville or Wenatchee or wherever they may be from, and we have to call the local police down there. So there is a significant amount of time spent on some of them. But I don't know if Don wants to talk more about his area.
One of the other new phenomena is certain iPhones will automatically call in a car accident because a person will be traveling into Madden Lake or Sawmill Lake and the phone's on the back seat, and because it's shaking in the movement of it, it will trigger that phone to automatically call it in. And now officers are traveling an hour. They can't get a hold of the person because they're out of cell range now because they've continued on their journey and they're fishing. So sometimes it's hours. The other issue is that we still respond because it's a 911 call. And if there's a victim of a domestic violence, then maybe that's all they were able to do. And we have to go to that house. And contrary to the drunk guy at the door, we do not need a search warrant to enter to ensure people's safety inside. We have to ensure that people are safe, which can sometimes result in a bit of conflict or a person needing to be detained until we ensure everyone's okay, or the person that has actually called and is locked in the bathroom is safe and gets the medical attention they need. So it varies. Yeah, there's a nuisance, but I think that's all acceptable in the grand scheme of things, that we are still responding and not, we're not brushing off 911 calls.
The other thing that we forgot to touch on, I think Don has it the same as in Oliver, as I have in the Soyuz, is we have a large South Asian population that does a lot of calls to India. And I'm not sure, I can't remember off the top of my head what their country code is, but it's 912 or something like that. And we do get a lot of accidental calls to 911 where there's just a misdial, but we do need to follow up with that family. When there's a language barrier, that sometimes takes longer, but ultimately we're finding a lot of it is just a misdial to India. So.
And just a bookend to that too is some of the 911 calls, the ban can be as short as a few seconds or a few minutes, as long as if we can phone them back and they say, well, my child was playing with the phone or something, we can then ascertain that there is no danger there and that it was an accidental butt dial or a child playing with the phone or something. But we really encourage those that recognize you've dialed 911. If we're trying to call back, call back. Don't be embarrassed. Call back and let us know that we're not needed so that we can alleviate that. Because if we keep calling back, we're going to knock on your door because we're just bound to do that to making sure you're safe. So
thank you. I have a little list here. I have Director Bush next, then Knodel, Director Coyne, and Director Gettins. Did I miss anybody? And Holmes. Okay. Director Bush?
Yes, thanks. So I'm from Costin, and we have a little park called Cobo Park, which is Crown land but leased by the Regional District. And we have no camping signs posted, but apparently if the homeless come there, we can't do anything about it. And I was just wondering if this is really the way it is or what. I can understand homeless being able to camp on Crown land that's not leased, but because we're leasing this, we must have some kind of control, and how can we stop unwanted camping? Thank you.
Yeah, so through the chair, I'll answer that. The great question, and this is a perpetual winds that we're in right now. This impacts the province, this impacts the country, the cost of housing, the lack of facilities for those that can't afford homes, for those that have mental health issues or addiction issues. They're finding difficult places to call home, if you will. So there is no easy answer to that. There is no definite black and white to that. There's case law in British Columbia that suggests that people can sleep or camp in public parks and available places, for up to for the night, and then in the morning they have to kind of get up and go. They can't really set a home up there, if you will, or set up an encampment. But we try to work with districts, we try to work with municipalities, because there's nothing really criminal involved. It's more of a bylaw matter, if you will. It's more of a cordoned off area of jurisdiction we leave it up to that jurisdiction to come up with their own rules and regulations. As long as there's nothing criminal going on, that being, stolen property being there, fights, those kind of things, the RCMP will go and keep the peace to keep everybody moving along and to collaborate with our jurisdictional partners. But there's nothing really criminal per se going on in that. It's a definite tightrope that we're always trying to balance, and because we do want to show some compassion and empathy to those that can't find a place to live and need a place to rest. But it is something that's prevalent, and it's something that we're still trying to navigate every day. So sorry, I don't have a black and white answer for you, but every situation's going to be a little different.
Thank you. Next question is Director Knodel.
Thank you, and through the chair, I know I speak for the whole board when I say my deepest sympathies for your fallen officer and a speedy recovery to the 2 wounded. A truly tragic affair. Those things that like deals you. I would like to also thank the Oliver Detachment for the speedy recovery and return of the pumps stolen from the Willowbrook Volunteer Fire Department Structural Protection Unit. It was a prime example of well done, speedy work. Unfortunately, it's the repeat offenders again, and as long as we deal with them by sitting around and singing Kumbaya, this is going to kind of continue. So, anyways, thank you very much, and carry on with good work.
Thank you, Director Knodel. Director Coyne.
Yeah, I just wanted to welcome Neil to the community, and we'll have coffee soon. But I hope it's not too much of a culture shock coming to our little town, and I look forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you. And Director Gettins.
Great, thanks from the chair. Just following up on Director George, and you had mentioned the report about the encampment in OK Falls and how there could be this idea where there's more people going to the rural areas because they're a bit easier to keep your thumb on top of them in Penticton and taking some stolen property outside. So we have an active encampment that's been building up on the north side of Highway 97, just on the south of Sage Mesa. And the immediate concern for the community is really just the fire risk. And as the weather cools and the fire, and we're on the top of this bank, and it's a dry grass bank, just like the rest of the valley. So that's the immediate concern. Secondary to that is that there looks like there's some building into the clay banks now. So where people are finding they're climbing up and kind of building into the clay banks. So over the past few days, I think I've probably talked to about 7 different entities, and nobody has ownership of this. So you and I had I've spoken with Bill, I've spoken with our bylaw. We've got a few emails from Modi because it's on Crown land that's under Modi's jurisdiction. And we don't have a way for a citizen to easily navigate or report this, or for a director to get help on this situation. So I think the next step now is we're going to go and talk to perhaps the Penticton Fire Chief, because we use their support as well in West Bench to see if there is a fire risk. I understand that's one step in the provincial legislation that might help us move this along. I've got it in writing from Modi that they certainly aren't interested in sending their workers without some support from RCMP, and I actually don't blame them. We look at the skill set you have, our Modi staff people don't have your skill set. But I would like the board to think about this. Like, this is something we need to do regionally as a group, and we need some sort of a table or a collection of way of doing this, so we don't have to send 17 different emails, because it feels like everybody's bouncing these balls all over the place. And I know that's no one's intention. We all just have a job that we need to do. But I do think we need a regional approach. As municipalities get more working with their bylaws and making things more uncomfortable, it's really easy to go to the rural area because we are literally across the street. And pushing it back and forth to each other, including the band lands and the crown lands, isn't an approach. So I would like to invite this board just to maybe talk about this at the strategic planning session. Thank you for getting back to me. We hope we can get your assistance in a little bit, but it's a valid concern. The fire is a valid concern. And I think that's what started the fire up by Indian Rock this summer as well, was a camp. So we need some help on this.
Through the chair, thank you so much for that. And I couldn't agree more. There needs to be a collaborative approach because it isn't, because it's not really criminal. There's provincial legislation is even, I'll say gray. But with that said, if Modi goes and wants to clean things out, or if bylaw wants to go and clean things out, and they want the assistance of the RCMP to keep the peace, we will definitely dispatch people for that and make sure that the people are safe and that it's done safely.
Can I follow up? So the process on it then is how to do that, because Modi won't go to the camp. Like, they won't go to the camp unless it's cleaned out. Like, that's the instruction that I've heard. So the camp, the citizens there, and I want to make it really clear that I know there's nowhere else to go. And I know that's a problem. And I hate this conversation. This is one, I cannot stand thinking of people that are homeless that due to a lot of different circumstances. And for us here, again, it's that fire risk portion of it that's making the community uncomfortable. But if Modi is unable and they're not equipped to go and face a camp without you, who goes and tells these people that we're concerned about fire risk? So are you using a fire? You can't use that propane. Who goes and says that to them? Because Modi cannot. They're not going to walk in there, these guys.
Yeah, and through the chair. So just to answer that, so I think you referred to it earlier. If fire wants to go, we'll go with fire and do a risk assessment with fire. They're the industry standards with regards to those kind of things. So we would collaborate with those and attend with them if that's the wishes of yourself or whoever's jurisdiction it is, whether it be Modi or RDOS or these. I will say, the in-house are very clever people in that they find these Bermuda triangles that are just have these jurisdictional conundrums, and we ended up really having to navigate that, and having a collaborative table, an active table that can address these as they pop up is a fantastic idea, and we'd love to sit at that and explore jurisdictional issues, just explore enforcement issues. But it has to be collaborative. Fire has to be there. RDOS has to be there. Everybody that's involved and is impacted. Nothing bad can come of a collaborative approach and just coming up with some kind of standard operating procedure with that.
Okay, thanks. So then can we just leave that with the RDOS staff on somehow to bring a suggestion to the table, like to bring some kind of this collaborative table? We've got a lot of highway in the south Okanagan, Similkameen, and we've got a lot of these Bermuda triangles. And I just think we need to do a collective approach where we all know exactly who does what and when, so we're not spending a lot. And like, it's so frustrating to hear the citizens because they don't know either. So can we just talk about that strategic planning or at some other time and get the table going? And in the meantime, I think that the fire chief and you doing these next steps for that particular case would be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Gettins. And I think, yes, strategic planning coming up quite soon. And it ties into things that we've had in our previous and moving forward to a solution-based table. Next is Director Holmes and then Director Konetz.
Yeah, thanks, Director Gettins, for raising that. It reminds me of the last question that was asked to the Premier at UBCM. It's such a dilemma and nobody knows what to do. I'm from Summerland, and I had a great meeting with Sergeant Preston last week. The communications with Sergeant Preston and us are excellent, are awesome. I just want to mention a couple things. We've had a couple press releases that were released in recently that that they just kind of came out of the blue. We didn't know anything about them. First, we heard about them, we read on Castanet, and then speaking with Sergeant Preston, he didn't really know about them either. Not that there was anything wrong with the press releases; they were fine. But it would be nice to get a heads up that they were coming out. And again, the issue isn't the communication between us and Sergeant Preston. The communication seems to be from Kelowna or wherever these press releases are produced to the detachment. And so I'm just wondering what the process is for, from going from Kelowna to the detachment to us, and is there any kind of protocols in place, and how can we make that work?
Yeah, so through the chair, I'll just address this real quick. I know the circumstances you're dealing with. I think the investigator at the time just called the media relations officer himself and made the release. to try to get as much information as they could. And that's in normal circumstances, what would happen is a lot of those press releases either come through me or a senior member of the area who will then refine that information, go through the commander at the time, who will, liaise with the elected officials, and then a release will be done, especially in a major event like a homicide or something that's going to have a lot of community discussion or community impact. A lot of times, myself, I'll liaise with the CAO of whatever jurisdiction and share that information and suggest that there's going to be a press release on that. So in this circumstance, it's unfortunate. We're going to work on that, give some operational guidance, make sure you're in the loop. And right, in this circumstance, it really wasn't. It was prudent maybe to get something out, but there should have been a few more people involved. But there was, a follow-up investigation, information relayed that the community, we got to the bottom of it, and the community is not at risk. And we tried to, for lack of better words, clean that up a bit. But I'll promise you things will get better. Okay, in Summerland. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Director Konaz.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation through the chair. You guys doing a great job. Really appreciate all the work you're doing. I just want to follow up just a bit with Director Getton's remarks, and I really look forward to that roundtable discussion about how we're going to handle, as a region, people that are unhoused. And I think it's important to talk about, all of us get together to talk about what we're going to do with people when we, because of fire danger, et cetera, when we do have to clear out these encampments, to make sure that Penticton isn't the only community that takes on the responsibility of so many people that need housing. So I think we can merge it with the housing collaboration we're having. And it's not just Penticton right now. I know there are others, but we need places throughout the region here, throughout the RDOS, that can support people who are unhoused. As you know, we're over franchised right now, or we have a lot of we don't have a lot of room in Penticton left to house people who need that help. So we're going to have to focus on it as a region.
Thank you. Director Weeb is next.
I just often, through the chair, when we have these dialogues, we talk about theft and crimes and all these other things. But I did a quick math, and it looks like 502 checks of well-being by our officers and members. And I just wanted to draw attention to that and say thank you, because as you know, many of us have had friends and family that have needed a well-being. You may not live in the same community, and to have somebody that you can trust to go in to try to make sure that there's not an issue, that there isn't a need for follow-up, that you guys do that. I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate, obviously, on some, it's the second level of call in that area, so thank you very much.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, this is something we do every day, and it's why we're here. Yeah.
Thank you. We all appreciate that. And finally, Director Gettins wanted a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. Just really quickly, I wanted to let you know that I have had a great communication with Sergeant Bentham as our rural liaison. We used to get, with Sergeant Bayless, I would get some stats that were specific to Greater West Bench. I was just wondering, I don't know how much time that takes or if there's a possibility to get that again. It's hard to take the temperature of a community when you're lumped into Penticton. So, and then when we get something like what's happening now in the encampment, and then there's a lot of information and discussion amongst citizens, it's hard to say, oh, here's our stats and they're Penticton, when it's a little bit different. So if that's a possibility, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, through the chair, certainly we can do that. Yeah, if Andrew Bayless can do it, anybody can do it. So, absolutely.
All right, thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the recent loss of Constable Rick O'Brien, and also understand that, you know, in the recent years, there's been a loss of quite a few members. And words are not enough, and I think it's important for us as a board if we could just have a moment of silence. Again, words are not enough. We appreciate all that you do and understand what you stand before each day you go to work. You and your families.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that recognition. And we always appreciate your time, and we always appreciate coming here and having a chance to answer some questions, because I know everyone's got questions, and this is a great platform to do that. So, but with that said, always our phones, our emails are always open for you. If you have some concerns, please let us know right away.
So lastly, not seeing any other questions, I can turn this back over to the CAO. And again, thank you for coming before us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks again, everyone.
If there's nothing else, CAO, in regards to protective services, can I see a motion to adjourn? Director Bush, okay, thank you. All in favor? Right, thank you.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and get started here at 11, I think it is. So everybody be back and ready to go at 11.
Well, we ran it to ground, actually had our engineers start to do the reports, and then we got to pull the EMCR and said, basically, until ownership is settled, there's nothing to do.
And who said that?
Whatever person at EMCR was talking to, our engineers. So I've got a call into April to enroll, but I haven't heard back.
Because we did have that acceptance in regards to priority setting.
But with Minister Forrest, not with the EMCR. And that seems to be the culture right now. So I thought if I can get Rolly to weigh in on it, but I think they're sitting right now, so I haven't heard back from him or April.
Yeah, I know. This is where we got to the last year.
So,
but we'll have to keep pounding.
And that's it. I mean, it has to get done. The upside now is they have official reports from engineers that said this is an issue. Yep. So if it fails, we do have a thing of, hey, you knew this was.
No, exactly. And that we just need to get in writing in regards to what we got out of that meeting.
Oh,
that we had in, and we had Rolly there, so we can say that there was intention.
Sure.
And there was.
I wish that's how the regional district worked, more like a county.
Hey, if we could make our way back to our seats, we'll get started in a moment.
Director number 8.
Okay, we've got a 11 o'clock showing here, so we will get started. We'll call the Corporate Services Committee meeting to order and look for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. First item on the agenda is the board's self-evaluation, and I'll go to the CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So the board has a history of occasionally doing self-evaluations on themselves in order to improve the efficiency of their board meetings. And we've also included comments on the chair section on the survey. So we started this back in 2010, and it really came out of just doing some research out of the National Association of Corporate Directors or the Institute of Corporate Directors. They all recommend that high-performing boards evaluate themselves from time to time, just because typically, especially in the corporate sector and the nonprofit, time is valuable, and they want to make sure that their meetings are as efficient and effective as possible. And also, if there are opportunities for improvement, it's really only through discussion that can happen. And especially in our situation, we don't often give the board those opportunities where you can just sit and discuss yourselves and your business and how it can become more effective. So this is one mechanism. It's just a tool. We have typically done those at the legislative workshop that we have annually. I think the last one we did, and I've included with this report just the last one we did in 2020. We didn't do one in 2021 because of COVID, and 2022, of course, was your election year. So it would be beneficial for at least having 1 year under your belt for all the new members before organizing that again. But the legislative workshop is coming up on November 2nd, and we're trying to finalize an agenda for that. So we wanted to get an idea, first of all, if the board was interested, and then secondly, the question set is attached and sort of the results of the 2020 evaluation. It's not, the first couple of years we did this, we actually had a separate survey for the chair, and the board at the time felt that wasn't necessary anymore. It's really about the meetings. Procedural efficiency is responsibility of all members. It's just the chair that gets that target to try and enforce them. So it's really about the meetings and the procedure, and some boards will do assessments on each individual board member. We've never gone that far, and frankly, I don't think it would be beneficial in our case. But certainly your meetings and your an opportunity to discuss whether there are opportunities for improvement, that would be beneficial. So that really then was the question. I just put it on for information, but if you're interested, we would arrange for you to do the survey at the legislative workshop. We'd evaluate it and bring it back to you later that afternoon, and we could either have discussion then, or we could set up a separate time in order to pick out specific topics out of the survey for the board to review.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm not seeing a whole bunch of hands here on this, but thoughts from anybody? Director Holmes?
I think this is a great idea, and I'd like to see the same questions just so we can compare with previous years.
Okay, I'm seeing a few heads nodding and agreeing. Okay, you want to make the motion that we do it if just to get a vote on it, and then we'll commit ourselves. Okay, motion is on the floor that we do a self-evaluation on November 2nd during the legislative workshop. I don't see a need for discussion unless someone has something really important to add. We'll just call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Just one opposed? Director Bush. All right, motion carries. That brings us on to the second item of the meeting, which is the closed session. I've got a little bit to read out here. That in accordance with Section 91A and 91C of the Community Charter, the Board closed the meeting to the public on the basis of personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, and labor relations or other employee relations. And I would assume that would also include the regional district, not just municipalities, but we'll give folks a second to leave that need to, and if Danny can get us into closed, please. And by consensus, we do have our lawyer will stick in the meeting with us in case there's some questions, and I think she's got a brief presentation for us on what we're dealing with. So. We're just waiting on YouTube? Okay, so looking for a motion to adjourn the corporate services. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? Motion carries. Lunchtime. Or am I missing something? No, it is lunch break.
So now you have to round to a roundup.
Danny, can I ask that you get us ready to go for the board meeting?
We got some made from Roger, which is nice. Have you ever tried one of Quad Flakes mega bales? Just exploded and full of dirt.
My son had the same problem, he used this swather, and it just filled the whole, all the hay full of dirt.
Yeah.
We have like 30 tons of beautiful dusty hay.
Beautiful dirty hay, yeah.
Have you ever was trying to, I'm gonna take one, I'm gonna cut one string, okay, I'll cut another one.
Well, it couldn't explode. If it doesn't explode, it means it was still too down.
12:15.
Yeah.
Got
Just waiting for the thumbs up from Danny there.
30 plus bales from Roger.
And is that
It's hot in here.
Get your heavy coat there off, buddy.
100%. Like this.
Thanks, Danny. If we could make our way back to our seats here, folks, we'll get started.
Yeah, because I think where we were sitting before the last stuff that we've got.
As people are making their way back, we will call the Regional District Okanagan Smilkameen regular board meeting to order. We have before us the proposed agenda. This is an opportunity to remove anything off the consent agenda. If there's anybody who has anything to remove off the consent, now's the time to do so. Not hearing anybody holler at me or waving a hand. So looking for a motion to approve the agenda. We do have, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, and 3 and 2 online, 11, 12. Okay. Look for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to the consent agenda, corporate issues. Looking for a motion on that one. Someone prepared to move it? Moved, thank you. Seconder? Thank you. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda, development services. Looking for a motion on that one. A mover? Thank you. Seconded? Great. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to development services. Item B1, a TUP in electoral area A, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this is the one that was before the board on August 17th, and it's a lot just north of Osoyoos with the one mobile home, the 3 RVs and the 2 food trucks. And it was referred back to administration to see if we could come to some further agreement with the applicant to make the application fit better with the area. And our concern is that the proposed use of the food truck is not seasonal, doesn't really fit with the TUP. As well as it is right on the border of Osoyoos, and it's a commercial use. So we had initially recommended against it, Mr. Chair, and that motion was put on the floor. So that is before you now.
Okay, so the motion to deny was put on the floor, and we had the applicant speak to us at that last meeting and heard from them. Any thoughts or direction on this? We've got the motion to deny. Director McCordoff, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I apologize. This what definitely came up at the Osoyoos Council table. We are not in favor of it under any circumstances. So we're quite concerned that bit of a mess there. It's right on the edge beside town boundary, and definitely we agree with the motion. Yeah, do not allow. Thank you.
Okay. Director Coyne, Senior?
Has there been any headway on negotiations or progress done to rezone it rather than TUP, or where did all that land?
CAO, can you?
The applicants decided not to change their application, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And from my perspective, one of the rationales for sending it back was to give them the opportunity, for one, to get the old mobile home out of there if it's not being used. And I don't think that's going to happen at the moment, the way it sits. So we do have the motion on the floor to deny. If there's no more questions or comments, I'm going to call the question. This one is a rural vote. So all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? The motion is carried. That application is denied. Down to B2, Electoral Area A, a DVP, CAO.
This is a deck on an accessory building about 8.75 kilometers north of Osoyoos, Mr. Chair. And just because the official community plan recommends no accessory buildings in this area, there's 2 accessory buildings on the property with no permits. We're recommending that this application be denied.
Okay. This one's another one that's in my area. And a quick question. It's my understanding that there are allowed accessory buildings. It's not allowed accessory dwellings. Is that correct? Planning? Okay. And I seen a hand, Director Gettens?
Thanks, Chair. I have a question. So this is a development variance permit to allow a construction of an accessory building. But further down under the background, this is one of the accessory buildings under a current stop work notice, and that the issuance of a development variance permit would need to be, it's required before they can apply for a building permit. I'm not understanding if they're applying for the development variance permit, isn't that what the next step for to get out of the stop work notice? I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to ask you here? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Maybe you're looking for the process.
I'm just looking for the order of events here, because it feels like, to me, it looks like they're doing what they've been asked to do, but I don't think I'm understanding that correctly.
Staff or Chris? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, so that's correct. In order to remediate the situation, they would have to be issued the development variance permit in order to apply for a building permit for the structure in its current state.
But even as a follow-up, so then but you're still recommending that they don't get the development variance permit?
Yes. That's staff's recommendation. Myself, I would hope someone would move the alternative to move it forward, and I can explain the rationale for that. Okay, are you moving it, Director Knodel? Director Coyne seconding it? Okay. An accessory building, in my opinion, is different than an accessory dwelling. It's my understanding from the staff report that there's concern that it might become an accessory dwelling, but there's no power or anything to it at this stage, from my understanding. So, and then I guess until that happens, I don't see it as an issue if it's just an accessory building. But I want to emphasize that to whomever is in the room from this application or online, that it needs to stay that way. So, any other discussion? We do have the motion on the floor to approve. Seeing no hands, this one again is a rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. B3, development variance, another one in Area A, CAO.
This is up on Old Richter Pass Road, Mr. Chair, and it's to formalize an existing carport. And what they're looking for is a variance to the side yard from 4.5 meters to 2 meters. And they will have to go through other processes like an ESDP permit and WDP. But this one is to authorize the development variance permit.
Okay, if I could ask someone to move that for me. Moved, thank you. Seconded. Any discussion? Don't think I'm seeing any hands. Oh, Director Monteith, go ahead.
Through the chair, I guess I'm looking at process. There's only one feedback, so is it normal for these to come to the board with very little feedback? Is it not part of the delegation bylaw?
Feedback is, maybe Ben can explain that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the criteria that we look at when considering if an application is eligible for delegated approval is whether it's received negative representation. So in this case, a negative representation was received and
that's why it's here.
Was not eligible.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, again, rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. B4, another temporary use permit, this time in electoral area E, CAO.
This is a vacation rental on Bartlett Road in Naramata, and it's a renewal, and we're recommending in favor of this, Mr. Chair.
I'll go to Director Federico.
I'll move the staff recommendation, please.
Okay, she's moving it. Is there a seconder? Thank you. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Again, rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B5, another temporary use in electoral area E, CAO.
Yeah, this is not a vacation rental, Mr. Chair. This is a tourist accommodation. So the application is for year-round use. There's 2 dwelling units adjacent to the house, not a part of the house, but adjacent to the house, and in the Workman Place subdivision. And they're applying for year-round use of those for accommodation. The difference in this, I believe the owner is on site in the residence, but not right attached to the cabins. So we're recommending that this be denied, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll go to Director Federico. Direction?
I'd actually like to send this to my APC if I could.
You'd like to make the motion to send it to the APC?
Motion to send to my APC, please.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, motion to carry or to send it to the APC, I think is corporate, correct? So it's a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to B6, another DVP in electoral area E, CAO.
Yeah, this is a really small lot on the lake in Naramata, Mr. Chair. And what they need in order to fit a dwelling on the lot is a variance to the front yard from 6 meters to 1.2 meters and the rear yard from 6 meters to 3.4 meters. There are some other conditions they'll have to meet, like it's in a floodplain and it goes into the wrapper. So we are recommending in favor of the variances, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Director Federico, over to you again.
Thank you. I'd also like to make the motion to send this to my APC, please.
Another one to the APC, seconded. It's on the floor. Again, this would be a corporate vote. Any discussion first? Director Gettins?
Thanks. I just have a question for staff about this, because when I saw this, I was surprised. And I know this has come before us, I think, because the septic will be held in its own container. So, and it's been in a floodplain. So if this goes through and it's in a floodplain, is there any liability when it does flood that can we come back to us by approving this?
Any response there?
Well, my initial response is the board's not being asked for a floodplain exemption at this particular time. It's really and I stand to be corrected, but in order for them to get through the process, in order to get to the building permit stage, that requires the provincial sign off on the riparian assessment. But the province wants to see, as part of that hardship claim, that they've exhausted all other opportunities in relation to varying other setbacks, including zoning setbacks. And so that's what this is leading towards. And I think the basic argument is that reducing the front setback allows for a greater protection of the streamside protection and enhancement area associated with the lake. So.
Okay. Director Coyne.
So you just said something that was interesting. You said we're going to send this for a riparian, and then later on they're going to have to come back for a floodplain exemption, possibly, if they get through their. So you're going to. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So we're going to make them jump through a whole bunch of hoops, and then they're going to come back to this board that could eventually say no after they spend all that money. Why don't we do all this at once is my question. Like, why don't we get through all these hoops? They can go to the riparian and get that done, because it's not cheap.
Is there a response?
Well, so from staff's perspective, they're in a floodplain. We know that, but we haven't seen anything to suggest that they're not going to comply with the floodplain requirements, which would generally be building the house up, right? If they can't comply, then yes, they would have to come back to the board and seek an exemption, but we don't know that at this point. We're just aware that they're in a floodplain area. I assume they know that, and they're going to have to design accordingly, and if they can't, then it may come back to the board.
That's why it's important to clarify. So good question, good response. Any other discussion on this? This is to go to the APC is the recommendation or the motion. Call the question. Corporate, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm assuming, Matt, were you opposed? That hand was late, so.
No.
Director Taylor?
My hand was
Okay.
up for approval.
All right, just a delay on the takedown, no problem. B7, I think this is very similar, is it not, CAO?
Same circumstance on the adjacent lot, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'd like to send it to my APC, please.
I think I knew that. She's making the motion, seconded. Do we need discussion on this? Again, it's corporate. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to item C1, CAO.
This is our agreement with Destination Osoyoos, Mr. Chair. So Destination Osoyoos is an organization that promotes travel to the Osoyoos area. And we had a 5-year, we have a 5-year agreement to contribute to them now. That expires at the end of 2023. So this is just getting ahead of the renewal.
I'm hearing an echo.
Okay. Should I speak quieter?
It was maybe Matt coming in, was still online. That was created an echo, that's all. No big deal.
Okay.
We got her corrected.
So it's a two-part recommendation, Mr. Chair. The first is to re-enter that 5-year agreement with a new lease, and the second part then is the approval of the 3% municipal and regional district tax that they have to apply for, and they need local government support for. And we're recommending in favor of both of those.
Okay, and they can be done in one motion. So look for someone to move that for me. Moved, thank you. Seconded, perfect. Any discussion on this? This one again is a corporate vote. Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to finance. Electoral Area E again, Growing Communities Fund, CAO.
Director Federico wants to allocate her Growing Community Fund $225,000 for a Spirit Park washroom and $25,000 for the repaving of the sports court. And we're looking for 3 readings and adoption on that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Director Federico.
I'd like to move the recommendation, please.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Any discussion on this? CAO?
Can I just remind the other electoral area directors, these have to be dedicated to a service by the end of this year, right?
Yeah,
you got
so
2.5
everybody's
months.
got to keep that in mind and get a location or a project for it. And it's got to be designated. It's good reminder. So on this one, seeing no hands, again, a corporate vote. Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Nothing under legislative services. CAO reports. CAO.
Just a reminder, Mr. Chair, that the Emergency Program Act modernization has now been tabled in the House, so the legislation itself is available for review. Currently sitting as a bill, but it will be discussed in the House and probably promulgated this year. And at the same time, they've announced that there's 2 more discussion papers out surrounding the regulations that will go with the Act, and they're available for review as well. And there will be consultation on that over this year, but they do anticipate that the regulation will be promulgated by this time next year. But the Act, the bill is available right now for review, and the discussion around the regulation is open.
Okay, good to know.
And then just following up on that, we do have a CAO group meeting scheduled for later this month. We'll be discussing that amongst ourselves at that meeting. And if there is anything that we want to suggest back to our respective board or councils, we'll be bringing those forward probably early in the new year.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? No. That's it. Any questions for the CAO on any of that? It's a good reminder on the Emergency Act, Programs Act. We should pay a little bit of attention to that and at least read what they're proposing. Going on into other business, chair's report. Not a whole lot to report at this stage. The only thing I would mention is I did get a brief update on the 360 review. Just heads up to the board that will be coming back pretty quick. I haven't got an exact date, but fairly quick. Had a good response from staff and the board members. And I think it may still be open if there's 1 or 2 that didn't complete that. So now would be the time to do so if you haven't yet. We got a bunch of directors' motions. Director Federico, yours is the first one up there. Motion 1. Thoughts? What's
I'll
your
move the
direction?
recommendation to just chat about the ETCBC grant. Because
the
then
board
there's
of-
2 following that.
Okay, so that you're moving the first one, which is that the board consider a regional approach to applying to the ETCBC Building Economic Development Capacity Grant, deadline October 18th. So that means we either got to approve something today or not, basically, because our next meeting is October 19th.
It's a motion because I put in the notice of motion last meeting.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
so we
realize
tried
it's
that.
a motion. So you're moving it, it's seconded. Discussion, Director Gettens?
Not a discussion so much, but on my e-scribe, I can't see the motion. I just have that there's a motion.
And it
then-
didn't show up on mine either, but it
Okay.
is on our agenda, my written
on the-
agenda.
yeah.
That's why I read it, just so that it was,
Okay,
out
I'm
there.
in favor of it. I don't have a problem with it. I just think that we should get the information ahead of time so we know what we're
yeah,
voting
I'm
on.
not sure why it wasn't on
Okay,
e-scribe.
and same with G2, the next one as well. I
Yeah,
don't have-
I'll make a point of reading it out as well, because it wasn't on there either. I didn't see it anyway. Any further discussion on that one? Director Conans, go ahead.
I don't know what I'm
Voting on?
There's no attachment, there's no explanation.
Can you do a brief?
Yeah, so the first motion was just that we would talk about it, and then there's 2 motions that's gonna follow that. Should I just go into it then?
Tell us.
Okay. So looking at the ETCBC grant, which is economic development, so I'm putting forward two different motions with an or in the middle. So one would be just for area E in particular. I would like to do a community sort of downtown revitalization plan. There's a bit going on in area E that I'd like to explore. So if I do it individually for my area, it'll be 15,000 for a consultant to help us piece that all together. So part of that would be, I'm looking to do like a bathroom master plan because I talked about bathrooms far more than I wanted to this year. And it just became very apparent that some comforts and some additional bathroom spaces were needed. So we'll be looking at a bit of that. And then I've got a group that's also beautifying some areas. So it's just putting together a comprehensive plan for what our village would look like. And the or caveat, which kind of would have lended into the housing strategy that we would have talked about this morning, is looking at a regional approach. So that would be up to 50,000 to look at how workforce housing could fit into our housing strategy. And so looking at that holistically on what we can do to help encourage and put into a strategy that would encourage more housing.
Okay, go ahead, Director Coyne.
There's a couple people on Etsy, is this Sue or?
I think
yours?
Sue.
Can we apply for more than one stream? I don't know. Because there's a couple different streams.
Director McCordoff.
Yes, you certainly can. There are several. There's a transportation one. I'm at a 2-day meeting starting this afternoon on that issue, but you need to get in by the deadline, and it will be looked at over the next 6 weeks, and then it will be I think talked about the middle of November. My suggestion is to Director Rodrigo that because you've done the work on this and you're organized, that you apply for you. I think that would make sense.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further discussion? The first motion is just to have a discussion, which is kind of what we're doing right now. I'm unsure of the rationale for that motion, but still, we'll call the question on it. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then let's go to the second part of that.
Well, the second part of that would lend into conversation. So if it's taking, I'll put forward the recommendation just to apply for area E.
I would suggest you do it in two, like separate motions. So if you want A or the area E to apply for sure, start with that one, and then we can deal with the second one and see if the board wants to go there.
Okay, so recommend that the RDOS apply to EDCBC Building Economic Development Capacity Grant to create a community / downtown revitalization plan for area E.
Okay, moved, seconded, thank you. Any discussion on that, Director Gettins?
Would the work be done, thanks, Chair, would the work be done by RDOS staff, and does the staff have the capacity? You're shaking your head? You're doing the app? You're doing the grant?
Either through myself or I have a contractor in the community that would assist with that.
Okay. Any other Director Collins?
Yep. I have a question about the, is this a type of matching grant? The RDOS wouldn't be, this is just so that you would take all the funding and everything. Okay, great.
It's strictly for area E, but I don't know what the matching percentage is or if there is any period, so no matching. But go ahead, follow up.
Just as a follow-up, it would be great to have some information about the grant ahead of time just because I'm interested in finding out more about it. So, and also I don't want to have to ask dumb questions. So if we could have the attachment with the grant application or what it entails, I would really appreciate it next time.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion is on the floor, and this is for Area E's Community Downtown Revitalization Plan, a grant. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. The second part of that, go ahead, Director Federico. Do you think it's?
The second part was really just an or. So, I mean, if there's appetite from the board to apply for the regional part of the building economic development capacity, then if we want to do that as a board, we can, but otherwise. Just putting it out there.
Okay. Go ahead, Director Coyne.
So it's more of a question for staff would this be something that we could look at? Because I think there's a lot of validity in a workforce housing strategy across the region because every area has a problem. I don't know if the ETSI, because if we're going to apply once for the regional district, I don't know if we can apply more than once. So is there a way we can maybe just put this into strategic planning and then come up with if we're going to do some other housing stuff, work this into the same thing? Like, I think this is key right now.
CAO?
That was the topic of our last report under planning this morning, Mr. Chair, that we didn't get to.
Yeah.
We are recommending that we do a housing a plan in 24 and on a regional basis, and that we invite all of our member municipalities to come together to do one, because the housing problem doesn't stop at corporate borders. So that was our recommendation this morning.
Okay. Director Getton, or do you follow up? Go ahead.
So do we even need this motion if it's already something we're working on?
Well, this is to directly apply for a grant, is this motion.
Yeah, but I think it's only up to 15,000. It's not going to get us anywhere.
50 for collaborative.
Still, it's going to be about 100,000 for this one.
Castlegar did one that was over 100,000.
Yeah, I was going to say it's over 100,000.
Okay, I seen a hand over here, Director
Yeah,
Getton.
thanks. Just given that we're talking about this, how challenging is it to get the presentation that we missed this morning? We're pretty ahead of schedule, I think. So is it possible
Yeah,
just to get this information and then we can make a
And
decision?
I see him sitting there. I don't know whether he was waiting for that or not, but, okay. Thank you, Chris. If it's a different stream, which it sounds like it is,
So
one would be, go ahead.
it's under the same funding stream, so it would be under the building economic development capacity, but then depending if one of the other, I don't know if because it'd be under collaborative, that if we would be able to put in 2 applications, because for Area E would be under the small communities portion of it, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. That would be something to explore for sure. Director Gettens?
I just have a question on sort of process here. I was just talking with Director Bloomfield here, and I'm like, here's something that's really different, I think, about regional district directors and bringing forward applications and requests like this that probably doesn't happen at the municipal level. Like, I can't see a lot of city councilors coming up saying that they're going to take on this application. But we don't have anyone at the staff level, I don't think, that's kind of watching for these opportunities and kind of doing that regional lens and trying to find things where we can match together like this. So I just think it's an interesting thing because there are some directors, me included, who's been accused of getting too far into operations. But I don't know how you get something for your community at this level without dipping your toe in. So I just wanted to kind of point that out there about the differences, just a reminder again, the difference between regional districts and municipalities. It's just a totally different animal.
Director Taylor, I seen a hand.
Yeah, I just really support the same comment. We went way down one project proposal this summer and then found we were kind of wasting our time working with staff to some degree, but that was challenging. And then now we have a very similar proposal as what Area E is proposing in our community, but we felt it was too difficult to get RDOS board support, so the community association is doing it.
So, if they can apply, though, that's fair game too. So, okay, I see you're ready there. I'll first go to Director Bush, and then we'll have.
Do we have to open up this planning and development committee?
This is not part of, I don't believe this is just an addition to, and as long as by consensus, the board is okay with this.
Speaks to the motion.
Yeah, it helps with the motion. A little bit more of an informed decision it will give us. Go ahead and make the presentation.
Sure, I think we are ready. Although you tend to shift gears after you get out of one committee. To start
Yes,
working on other stuff.
I understand.
So, we got to get our get back in our mindset here for this, but fortunately I can pass it over to Shannon to.
Oh, so she's got to get her
handle this one.
mindset.
Yes, so.
Go ahead, please, Shannon.
All right. So, I mean, some of this I think Chris covered today in his tiny homes presentation, but I'll just kind of quickly breeze through it. So as we know, a director's motion was made in February 2021 that had directed staff to prepare a discussion paper around different affordable housing alternatives. Since we undertook the housing needs assessment, and that was received by the board in April 2021, our conversation around housing has kind of broadened a bit. And this was reflected in the more recent Planning and Development Committee meeting, where we had brought forward a number of various options that the board could consider, one of which included undertaking a housing strategy. So just to start us off, I'll just go through kind of the housing needs assessment side of things. So a housing needs assessment, the one that we undertook, provided a comprehensive overview of the housing situation in the region. It involved the participation of course, RDOS, the District of Summerland, the City of Penticton, and the Village of Karamias. And this report indicated that housing is not being provided at a level that could meet, at the time, the current as well as the anticipated future needs in the region. So while the housing needs assessment had outlined tools that were available to us to address housing related issues at a regulatory level, it didn't actually specify any specific solutions or strategic recommendations to tackle these issues. That being said, these types of recommendations, opportunities, and action items are typically found in a housing strategy. So that would make this a natural next step since we've already completed the housing needs assessment. So then what is a regional housing strategy? It's a coordinated document which would identify shared housing goals, objectives, and opportunities that can be tackled by a regional district and its member municipalities in order to address those issues that were outlined under that previously undertaken housing needs assessment. It effectively provides for role clarification between the regional district as well as the member municipalities, and it clarifies how the various governments hold responsibility for carrying out different actions in order to achieve our shared goals. It also acts as a documented accountability measure, and it establishes a monitoring system to track progress towards those goals and objectives that we identify. We do note that the regional districts of North Okanagan and Central Okanagan as well have already completed their regional housing strategies after their housing needs assessments. So just to go through the benefits of undertaking a regional housing strategy, first and foremost, a regional approach would acknowledge the diversity in housing needs across the region, and it takes into consideration the fact that one single jurisdiction is unlikely to be able to meet every diverse form of housing need. It also recognizes that housing issues do cross jurisdictional boundaries. So when we consider, let's say, the workforce in Summerland, it's recognized that not all workers who work within the Summerland boundaries actually live there. So this type of approach would recognize that we have people who live in electoral area F, for example, in Falder Meadow Valley, who are commuting into these areas, and then any housing issues that we're seeing within these rural areas would likely impact what's going on within municipal boundaries as well. Additionally, a regional approach would ensure that actions are aligned with the various housing-related goals and policies that we see within our RGS, and it would act as a cost-saving mechanism and prevents duplication of work if we were to undertake individual strategies as a regional district and member municipalities. Lastly, given the previous undertaking of a regional housing needs assessment, a similar regional approach to a housing strategy would provide for a more coordinated and consistent response to the various issues that we had outlined in that assessment, as opposed to taking a piecemeal approach. And then just some other considerations. In support of undertaking a regional housing strategy, we do note that in addition to supporting diverse, accessible, and affordable housing opportunities, our regional growth strategy also speaks to exploring the various benefits of undertaking a regional housing plan. And I believe, as Chris mentioned this morning, this would similarly support the board's preliminary strategic priority for 2023 of reviewing housing options in the area. We also recognize that various grant funding applications may require things such as a housing needs assessment to have been undertaken, and this is particularly the case with the CMHC. Housing Accelerator Fund. So undertaking a regional housing strategy could actually provide a supportive document for further grant funding. And then from a legislative standpoint, it should be noted that we do need to update our housing needs assessment by April 1st, 2026. So this requirement stems from the Local Government Act, which requires local governments to update their housing needs assessments every 5 years. And we had actually completed ours in April 2021. So at the time, the census data that was available to us was the 2016 census data. And then we had actually received the completed housing needs assessment just following the initial, I think, distribution of the 2021 census data. So it was not incorporated into that report. So our updated housing needs assessment would then be utilizing the 2021 census data, which would reflect some of the major changes that we saw in our demographics and housing trends and needs, which occurred kind of following the COVID pandemic. And given that we need to update our housing needs assessment and the expected completion of the regional housing strategy in 2024 and 2025, the board could consider actually getting a head start on updating the housing needs assessment and completing it jointly with the housing strategy so that it can actually incorporate and base recommendations off of an updated housing needs assessment. So on top of that, getting a head start on updating the housing needs assessment would put us on track to kind of establish this 5-year cycle, which would utilize more recent data to inform our objective setting and policy making, particularly within our regional growth strategy and our official community plan bylaws. So starting from the top, there's a number of legislative requirements that kind of utilize a 5-year cycle or timeline. Statistics Canada releases census data every 5 years. So the last one was 2021. The next one will be 2026, 2023, and so on. And given that the Local Government Act requires that the housing needs assessment be updated every 5 years, it would be beneficial to kind of line this up with getting the most up-to-date census data that it's being based off of. And then subsequently, this feeds into our regional growth strategy review. The Local Government Act does require us to consider whether we do need to make amendments to the regional growth strategy bylaw every 5 years. And then, as the RGS also informs our OCP bylaws, we would then be ideally reviewing our OCP bylaws every 5 years. And really, ideally, we'd be starting, as I mentioned, our housing needs assessment and RGS cycle kind of as close as we can to the census release period so that each document most closely represents the population at the time in which it's released. And as of right now, our current review cycle is kind of lagging because it's ending up at the end of every census cycle. So from our perspective, while it's a bit of a trade-off because it would slightly delay the completion of a regional housing strategy, there does seem to be some merit in utilizing more up-to-date census data as a basis for completing a regional housing strategy. So as I mentioned, there were a number of benefits that we have to undertaking a regional housing strategy, but there's other also considerations that should be made to the fact that it will require quite a bit of resources to both undertake the actual strategy itself and potentially additional resources to sustain any monitoring programs that we identify. And we're not clear at this point what the actual cost benefit of those measures would be. It's also noted that the regional growth strategy, as well as the various OCP bylaws, already contain housing-related goals, objectives, policies, and strategies. So that there is a bit of a concern there that a regional housing strategy would just simply restate the value of these. And this concern is particularly pronounced in a case where the regional district solely were to undertake its own individual housing strategy as opposed to involving the member municipalities. We do also note that if a housing strategy were not to be pursued, this would free up, obviously, staff and budgetary resources that would allow us to otherwise undertake other housing-related projects that we had mentioned previously during that March Planning and Development Committee meeting, such as making various amendments to the density provisions in the zoning bylaws, waiving DCCs, and so on. So just to wrap it up, the options that we've presented to you would be to, and our administrative recommendation is to invite the member municipalities to participate in a joint housing needs assessment update and regional housing strategy in 2024 and 2025, initiate a regional housing strategy, or to not initiate a regional housing strategy, and as kind of a sub option to specifically do just an RDOS specific housing strategy, which would not involve the member municipalities.
I might just jump in quickly too. So and you may have noticed when Shannon started her presentation, when we did the housing needs assessment in 2019, 2020, it was a regional project, but I mean, coordination can be difficult sometimes. And, you know, the list of participants wasn't all of the member municipalities, and that's because some of them had already initiated their own projects. And so if we were to try to do a regional housing strategy, we're going to need some lead time to try to coordinate with the member municipalities and their staff and hopefully get to them at a point where they're able to consider this as part of their budget planning for 2024 if this is to be a true project. But we're also aware that I think some of them, and I could be wrong, but I think Oliver's already provided direction to its staff to initiate a strategy already. So we recognize that some municipalities might already be further down this road than we are at this point. So just a consideration that, like, we recognize a lot of benefits to a regional project, but just the coordination of pulling that off might be a difficult one. So,
okay, thank you for that, Director Johansson.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I wouldn't say we're very far down the road at all. We've identified that we need a housing strategy. We did look at some other municipalities that had completed a housing strategy, and I mentioned earlier that Castlegar, their housing strategy was over $100,000. And so looking at $100,000, there's a lot more we could probably spend that on than a housing strategy. We definitely, I mean, we need a housing strategy, but we also need a current needs assessment, because I think things have changed considerably since the last time a needs assessment was done. And we do have a discussion coming up just to try and identify what our goals are. So we're just starting that process at this point.
Okay, Director Holmes.
Yeah, certainly. Off the top, I would say the greater benefit would be us working together to update our needs assessment, since we're required to do that anyway. If we were to do a regional housing strategy, I would want to take this back to my council first to get their perspective. I have personally some concerns about it. I think how Summerland sees Summerland is a lot different than how the region sees Summerland in terms of housing and what its role in the region might be. And just hearing discussions around the table, I think the rural areas are far apart from some of the municipalities, specifically Penticton, and you'll end up with some pretty opposing goals on housing. I think that's a risk if we try to do this all together, and you'll end up with a pretty watered down strategy. That would be my fear of us all going in, plus the cost. I'm not convinced of the benefits of us trying to do this together.
Okay, Director Coyne.
So I'm not sure if I'm in the same place as Director Holmes, but my concern is, like, we didn't participate last time because we were already ahead of you guys. But we're just finalizing our new OCP. Like Area H is OCP and ours don't align anymore. Area H and sort of part of Area G are the biggest influencers on us. And, we kind of got to get all those things in alignment. The strategy, I think, would help play into some of that, but I'm not sure if we could do a full RDOS one, or if it would have to be kind of, that plus the different areas as well, right? Because what happens in the Smilkameen and the upper side of the Smilkameen isn't going to be the same as, say, what happens in Costin and Karamias, because they kind of go more over the mountain that way for work, and everybody else kind of comes our way. So I want to figure out a way to do this. I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but we need to find a way, and we need to align those OCPs as well, because right now the burden's on us and we need help from outside of our boundaries as well.
Okay. Any comments, staff? I think, go ahead. If you.
Well, I'm only responding simply to the comments about consistency, and of course, we're the only regional district that has a sub-regional growth strategy. So one way obviously would be to bring the Similkameen in to the growth strategy. And I know. I couldn't, the door was opened a little bit there. And I just,
not while I'm here.
Director Gettins?
I just have a couple of questions based on that as well, but there's an administrative recommendation, but do we have a motion on the floor that we still need to vote on? We're done.
We haven't made the
Okay.
motion yet.
So if there's a sub-regional growth strategy, but Similkameen isn't, this wasn't my original question, but you're not a part of it, but that never comes to this table to be voted on. That's just your decision, the Similkameen's decision, and with the rest of us, it doesn't. We don't get a say in it?
Somebody could make the motion and it would be a board decision overall, but it would be an unpopular discussion and
Well, no, but
uncomfortable
if we're
maybe.
talking about regional benefit and regional economic, but then one group gets to say not this, or, we have other municipalities that don't participate in some of the conservation work we do, I'm just curious, regional shouldn't be convenient, so that was my kind of conversation question. I'm curious about how that division was made. If we're also talking about now a benefit of a regional housing assessment, but we have a sub-regional growth strategy, it's kind of, it's not balanced. I think with the administrative recommendation here, it's just an invitation to the municipal members to partner or to participate. And the staff made it pretty clear they need time to coordinate it. So it may not work for everybody, but I'm in favor of having the conversation to see if we can get some coordination on moving that. So I think this is a good idea. So I'll move the administrative recommendation. It's just an invitation. And to me, that just means it's room for discussion to see if we can line this up.
Okay. Right now, though, she's making the motion to look at a regional housing strategy.
It's in our committee.
It was the
It's
presentation.
the administrative report.
No, that motion hasn't been moved either, but she's
What are you
making.
talking about?
You're
That's not on your.
This motion that was a notice of motion from Director Fedrigo is not on the floor yet. And you're introducing a motion that came from the presentation
Right.
of staff, just so that everybody's clear as to what it should have been from the committee, but it's here at this board right now. And it was to look at a regional housing strategy, an invite to the municipalities to undertake that. It's moved, but it hasn't been seconded yet. So, okay, there's some seconders. Director Holmes, and, I had Director Bloomfield first and then Director Holmes.
Thank you. And so if we look back to right after the election, we had a strategic planning session. And one of the, I think maybe the top item on our strategic planning, what we wanted to deal with, what had to be dealt with, was housing. And so, just to not do a regional growth strategy and not do a regional housing needs assessment, it sounds counterproductive to the goals of our strategic plan. To not want any growth seems to me to be counter to the important factor that the importance of housing that came out of the strategic plan. And so I think it's certainly something that we should explore. From a regional perspective, because the huge amount of attention that is on housing now from high levels of government, and the carrot that they're dangling that infrastructure spending will be based on growth and housing needs assessments. If we, I caution about drawing lines in the sand about a regional growth strategy because it may affect our ability to get grants for infrastructure spending from high levels of government if we're not in agreement as to how the region's going to grow. There is also the factor that, if you want all the growth in the municipal areas, then with growth comes extra services, and that's another discussion as well as to how the region contributes to services.
Okay, good points. Director Holmes and then Director Coyne.
Director Bloomfield just kind of illustrated my earlier comments. Mike, just a question though, there's two parts to this motion. The second part was that the regional housing strategy be added as a strategic project to the corporate business plan. Is that included in this motion or not?
Not at this point. It was just invite the municipalities to see if there was interest.
Okay, thanks.
Director Coyne?
Yeah, so I'm in favor of us sitting down and having a bigger conversation about our housing. The regional growth strategy is not something. It doesn't mean you're anti-growth. I think it's quite the opposite. We're pretty pro-growth out in the Similkameen. It just does not constrain us to where we can and cannot grow. Our OCPs already do that, and if you take a look at our new OCP, we have quite a few areas that are growth dependent. And we have some pretty lofty growth goals. I mean, we need about 300 to 500 new homes in the next few years, and we just approved a 150 unit apartment complex. So it's not that we're anti-growth. We just don't need to be in a system that says this is where you are going to grow and you're not going to grow. We've already got those in our OCPs, and that's the difference between you guys and us. And I think this has some, like your growth strategy also has something to do with the water board and all that stuff as well, doesn't it?
I forget the exact rationale, but there was some other.
That we're not part of, like we're not part of any of that stuff, right? So, and that's not because, it's just because we're not part of your water system and everything. So there's differences there, but we're very much aligned, I think, in a lot of our other areas. We just don't have a document that says we're going to have to do this and this is where those growth are going to happen.
Okay. So there is some interest by the sounds of a invite, at least, to the municipalities to see if there's interest. So we have the motion on the floor. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All right. Any opposed? Just two. Directors Holmes and Conan's motion would carry to extend an invite. We got anything else on the go here, Director Federico, as far as your second motion? In my opinion, just so you're aware, I think we're almost too tight to this deadline to make this work for the regional portion. So there's some notices of motion. I'm going to just go to Director Coyne quickly. He can verbalize those motions in case, I think they were in the agenda, but go ahead, Director Coyne.
Yeah, my screen timed out on me. So but, the whole point is that, I mean, this is not going to be dealt with today. I just want to make these motions. Everybody can read them and think about it until the next board meeting. We're having such huge issues over here, communities being divided. And I can't overemphasize how upset the local residents. You guys seen the 70 odd letters this morning from the Missoula Lake people. If we were to do I get the last 3 weeks has been nonstop phone calls from people at Eastgate. The issue, a lot of the issue out there was the lack of knowledge of how to deal with, like how to put in the proper paperwork to the right place, because they were sending them to bylaw, which doesn't get them on the agenda into the package. Because when it goes to bylaw, it stays at bylaw for all kinds of different reasons. But those end up being locked up there. So people are incredibly frustrated. Another interesting thing that just came out this past week, that part of why it's all worded the way it is that, like, we have 70% of the landowners in Area H are absentee landowners. So in other words, 7 out of 10 homes here are not lived in year round. They're vacation places. A lot of them aren't suitable to live in year round. there are some places that only are used in the winter. There are some places that are only used in the summertime. And, you know, that's those people's choices. So that's the whole idea here is that we can define it in our OCP of where these areas are that are going to be vacation rental places. If that community wants them. You know, my area H makes up about 11 different communities in our area. And they're very, very distinct. Tulameen thrives on vacation rentals. Others don't. So this is why we need to think about this. And I know that if all three of those motions are passed, it's going to be one heck of a lot of work for Chris and his crew. But quite frankly, the work needs to be done because these are very distinct communities and they need to have their say. The local people need the input, and the only way you can do that properly is through the OCPs. I know our OCP is old now. It's on the docket for, I don't know, pretty soon it's going to be done. So we need to get this done in a proper way. This TUP process is not working for us, and the demographics of people have changed so much in the last couple of years. The people that are coming here they're not as responsible as they used to be. Let's put it that way. So we need to be able to have them in specific areas where there's RCMP available, where there's healthcare available, all those types of things. So that's why I want it to be stretched out and figured out, and all of the public consultation that goes along with it. I know I'm probably rambling here, but as you can hear, I'm very, very passionate about this. Damn it, we got to do it right there. So anyways, that's why I don't want to deal with it today. I want it just to be as a notice of motion. And then people can think about this, or anybody's got any questions.
You've got an open invitation to call you, sure.
Yeah, because this is very, very important.
All right, thanks, Director Coyne. That brings us down to board members' verbal updates. Anything from the board to apprise the group of? Anything going on in your communities that you want to notify? Go ahead, Director Roberts.
Thank you, through the chair. Not in regards to what's coming, but what has happened. We had a great event last Sunday at the Barefoot Resort. We had a live band. We had the Wienery food truck. We had toys for the kids to play in the sand, people to relax and buy wobbly pops if they wanted to. And we had s'mores and a bonfire later. So it was a really good time, and I really enjoyed myself, and I'm looking forward to next year already.
Anything further? I'll just finish with the board members' updates, and then I'll come to you, CAO. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks for the people that organized that. I know it always takes a lot of work, and yeah, those things will grow. Good on you.
Anything further? Director Gettins.
Thanks. I don't have an update, but I would really appreciate maybe at the next meeting, just hearing an update on how everybody's ministry meetings went at the UBCM, if there's anything kind of moving and any follow-up. I'm just sort of curious. I know we were at a lot of them, so I'd like to know what's going on.
Okay. We'll put some updates together. Director Bloomfield.
I'd just like to announce it's in the media today that Penticton hired a new CAO, and it's we promoted from within. It's Anthony Haddad. So
okay.
Just
Congrats.
FYI.
Congrats. Director Holmes.
Yeah, I'd like to, first of all, thank Director Roberts for organizing the picnic on Sunday. It was great. It was excellent. Thank you for spearheading that. And I'll expect a thanks from Director Bloomfield for training his new CAO. So congratulations to our former CAO. I'm really happy about that. And I'm sure he'll be amazing for Penticton, I know. And also, I would certainly, it was great seeing everybody, most of you at UBCM. It was a pretty crazy week. I know we're kind of like ships in the night, passing each other, going to various meetings and whatnot. And I would certainly like to hear how everybody's meetings went, especially the RDOS, the Rural Directors meetings, but all of them. We had quite a number of them, and some were better than others. And I would just like to say that we came home, Summerland came home from UBCM with some impressive hardware for our trophy case. We received a UBCM Community Excellence Award in Asset Management for our integrated road and water plan, where you can go onto our website, click on any road in town, and it tells you the condition of that road, the condition of the water pipes, when they're slated to be replaced, and it's a pretty groovy thing, and so that's why we got the award for it. And we also received the Climate and Energy Action Award from the Community Energy Association for our solar and storage facility, which will have its grand opening in November, and I'll make sure everybody gets an invite. Thanks.
Okay, congrats on the awards. Anything further from board members, verbal updates? Seeing none, the CAO had asked to loop back to him on something. Go ahead.
I did, Mr. Chair. I neglected to mention some of the accomplishments of some of our staff during my CAO report. So I would I'd just like to report that in addition to all the work that Eric Thompson does, when we're activated in our EOC, we did lend him to the Columbia Shuswap Regional District this year. They were struggling with the egregious amount of fires and some of the difficult regions that they were in up there. And we sent Eric up, and he did a great job for them. We all know that he does that he is the face of our organization when we're working with media during an event, and he did the same up there for them, as well as advise them on how on their public relations campaign. So good work by Eric on that, and he also did bring back some great suggestions for us, as well as what Columbia Shuswap was doing that may help us in future as well. And we also have Mark Acoyne, our legislative coordinator, who was just appointed to the Local Government Management Association Responsible Conduct Resource Administration Committee on the Code of Conduct. And we know that Mark did a lot of work on our Code of Conduct with Ms. Malden through the CAO group when we presented to our board, and was subsequently appointed to the provincial board through LGMA. So I was remiss in not mentioning that before, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, thanks for updating us on it.
Ms. Malden pointed that out to me.
Yeah, it's all right. Every now and then we do need a tap, tap. Anything further? Seeing no hands, looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.